Welcome back to FPL Therapy, the weekly podcast hosted by me, FPL Raptor, where each week we are joined by a different guest. And for Gameweek 21, I'm delighted to say that we have Tom, also known as Golden Goal Fantasy Football. Tom has over 11,500 subscribers on YouTube, and it is extremely deserved for not only the consistency, but also the quality as well, and also a very good FPL manager. Please check out his channel. It will be linked in the description, and on YouTube, it will be in the title as well. Tom, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me on, mate. Really appreciate it.
No, I'm very happy we can make this happen. And you were one of the guests that sadly had to cancel because, what was it, a tree fell on the train last time you were trying to come?
Whatever the name of the storm was, just cancelled all the trains, unfortunately. So we're back.
We had issues with the weather the first time, and then just before we're recording this, there were like amber weather warnings. So we were dreading the worst, but we both made it actually early, which is fantastic. So yeah, we're going to talk about everything Game Week 21 today. This podcast is sponsored by Club, the wonderful free-to-play fantasy football mobile game. And later on, Tom will be helping us to hopefully improve our club, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And if you are watching on YouTube, please make sure to like and subscribe. We're very close to 14,000 subscribers. So I'd love your support in hitting that. And also, if you're listening on audio, please rate 5-star. You can do that on Spotify or Apple. So I've actually invited a guest on that is not only having a cracking season, but has also had a good game week. It seems to be I invite people on generally when they're doing quite badly. So this is fantastic. And not only are you having a cracking season, but you've also done that whilst owning Haaland the entire time.
Yeah.
So let me read out your team for those on audio from Game Week 20, and you can talk us through it and the fact that you are 61k, top 100k, whilst the entire time keeping Haaland. So in goal, we've got Sells, who has been an absolute monster for you, and coupled with Ola Aina. You got that double clean sheet in Game Week 20. You've then got Hall and Robinson as your other defenders. Obviously, didn't pull through for you in Game Week 20, but that's a lovely defense. Like, you see, there is an absence of Arsenal and Trent, but the cheaper defenders have been doing it, and that's probably why you're ranked where you are. Midfield of Salah, captain, Semenyo, Palmer, and Dibbling. Obviously, Rodgers is on the bench. I assume you would have probably played Rodgers if Dibbling didn't get suspended. And then also your front line of Haaland, who obviously got the brace, Isak, and Wood. I mean, generally, when you look at that team and Colwell on the bench, doesn't look like you're sacrificing that much other than obviously the 3 cheap mids and no premium defenders. But as I say, not only have the cheap mids delivered, but the cheap defenders have as well. So talk us through your team, talk us through your season and how it's been going.
Yeah, good season. I also played my triple captain when Haaland scored his hat-trick against Ipswich, which I think has helped that rank.
Okay.
But yeah, I've just held on to Haaland despite abuse in the chat in my deadline streams. I've just kept the faith because I know City have been, obviously dropped off a cliff basically, but I always just had faith that it would come good. And I saw these good fixtures that he's got coming up. That's why I've held on to him. And I think, weeks where, Salah's been so consistent, but I always felt there were weeks where you could go for someone else. And I think, we'll talk about, I guess, game week coming up, but I think Haaland captain this coming week is a nice shout to have.
I love that I've invited you on when you're doing so well, and the fact that you've held Haaland, because there's been this narrative that you've held Haaland, your season's over, and it goes to show there are so many ways to get points in this game. Yeah. And like, you've got no Trent, no Arsenal defense, and Haaland. If someone showed me your team, and this is no disrespect to your team now, I'd say your rank must be down lower, but you've had the points from Ola Aina, who's been a legend, obviously Hall, Robinson, Chris Wood, Isak. Like, your team's actually pretty good. So yeah, I love seeing different teams, because I think a lot of people are converging to a team probably similar to mine. And for you to be 200k above me with a team that isn't as conventional, I like it a lot. I will be interested when we move on to City in particular to find out how you're feeling about Erling Haaland and whether you feel like there is a chance of holding him any longer than the next couple. So going on to my team, I achieved 61 points. So it was a third red arrow on the bounce, which isn't ideal, but they've been small red arrows. Like earlier in the season, I was getting those monster red arrows. So I don't mind red arrows when they're small, as long as I can then get some big green arrows. But I had Sanchez in goal, conceded in the final minutes of the game, I think like the 82nd, 83rd minute, which wasn't ideal. My back line absolutely stunk it up. So I had a Trent 0-pointer, Robinson 1-pointer, and Gabriel 2-pointer. So again, with a much cheaper defense, you've battered mine. Then my midfield 4 was Enzo, Salah, Fernandes, and Palmer. So Enzo 1-pointer, 4th blank in a row. Palmer delivered, but he's not gaining me many points. He's ownership. Salah, obviously, everyone captained. And then I had Fernandes' 7-pointer. He had a brilliant game, and we'll talk about Fernandes versus Ahmad a bit later, because I think that's going to... Are you a Man United fan?
I am, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So obviously 2 Man United fans, we'll discuss that in a bit more detail, because I think Fernandes versus Ahmad, is it worth saving the 3 million, is a really good topic to discuss. And then my front 3 all delivered, and I'm really happy with them. It's Wood, Mateta, and Isak. Obviously, Wood, Mateta, 8-pointers, Isak, 7-pointer. And if you look across the next 4 or 5 game weeks, I'm really liking the setup there. And I don't think, unless there are any injuries, I'll particularly need a transfer coming up. So it's a pretty good team.
Yeah,
I'm happy with it.
Good,
but there are potential issues, and I only have the one one free transfer. So I'm not in an overly flexible spot, but at the end of the podcast, we'll discuss our teams and our plans in a bit more detail. So the plan is going to be to sort of look ahead to game week 21, and we're going to go through each of the games and preview them. But something that we need to do first is discuss the EFL Cup semi-finals, because that is obviously directly relevant to FPL from a blank and double perspective, but also the players that played and were on the bench. And then we'll move on to discussing some other sort of blanks and doubles. And then after that, we'll go through each of the games. So this will be a bit of a rambly section from me, and then I'll chuck it across to you, Tom. So essentially, the EFL Cup semi-finals have just happened, where Arsenal lost 2-0 to Newcastle and Spurs beat Liverpool 1-0. Obviously, as well as a lot of our players playing in those games, the reason that is important is the two teams that reached the final of the EFL Cup will blank in game week 29. Okay, so one of Arsenal and Newcastle will blank in 29, plus the team that they're playing against, and then one of Spurs or Liverpool will blank in game week 29 and the team that they're playing against. So, to put that into perspective, if it was to end right now, because there are second legs going on in February, early Feb, it would be Newcastle and Palace would blank in 29, and Spurs and Fulham would blank in 29. So it would be those four teams, Newcastle, Palace, Fulham and Spurs, which means they have no fixture in game week 29. However, obviously there is a second leg. Arsenal could turn it around, Liverpool could turn it around. In game week 29, Arsenal play against Chelsea. So if Arsenal reach the finals, it would be Arsenal and Chelsea blanking. And if Liverpool reach the finals, which is probably the more likely team to overturn that deficit, it would actually be Liverpool and Aston Villa that would be blanking. So hopefully that is clear. 4 of those teams will be blanking in game week 29. And that is also then relevant to game week 33, because game week 33 is going to be a double game week, and the teams that blank in 29 will double in 33. So as things stand, Newcastle, Palace, Fulham and Spurs would all double in game week 33. So that becomes very relevant. Like, let's say you've already got Lewis Hall, Gordon, Isak, and Ismail Assar. Yes, Munoz and Mateta look really great, but on the basis that Newcastle Palace is a blank, do you want to go out and get a 5th player that might be blanking? That's assuming that you don't own any players from the likes of Spurs, Liverpool, Fulham, and Aston Villa, who also might be blanking. I'm not saying that this should put you off like drastically from your transfers, but I also feel like, I mean, how do you feel about this? So let's say you've got like 5 or 6 players that look likely to blank anyway. Would this put you off loading up more, or do you just think game week 29 is so far in the future, I don't need to focus on that right now?
I think it depends if I've got my free hit available as well. Because the blank game weeks for me feel like prime time to use the free hit if you've still got it.
Yeah, so game week 29 could be a really nice free hit week. Just worth noting that game week 34 will also be a blank game week because of the FA Cup semi-final. So don't rush to definitely play it in 29, because game week 34 will almost definitely be a bigger game week, blank game week, where we might have up to 8 teams that are blanking. So just to go through on YouTube, and if you're listening on audio, jump over to YouTube. There's a nice diagram will be on your screen. But we have, in terms of upcoming doubles and blanks, game week 25 is expected to be a double game week between Liverpool and Everton. That is not confirmed. It could be game week 24, but likely to be 24 or 25. So those two teams will probably double in game week 25. In game week 29, we have that blank game week caused by the EFL Cup final. In game week 33, we'll have a double game week for the teams that blank in 29. We then have a blank game week in 34 for the FA Cup semi-finals, and then we have a double game week in 36 for those teams that blank in 34. So we basically have 2 blank game weeks in 29 and 34, and they will cause 2 relatively decent doubles in 33 and 36. And then in addition, any other random doubles that we get, like Liverpool-Everton, could be chucked in elsewhere. So essentially 2 big blanks, 2 big doubles to deal with. And therefore, obviously, if you've not used your free hit, I wouldn't be using it in a single game week. We really need to try and save it for these blanks and for these doubles as well. So just outside of obviously just clearing up there the blanks and doubles, and we'll find out exactly which teams will blank and double after the second leg of the EFL Cup semi-finals in February. Just to discuss the game. So obviously Newcastle beat Arsenal 2-0. Newcastle are flying at the moment, aren't they?
They are, yeah, but I don't think, well, Arsenal's finishing of their chances was pretty poor, but I don't think Arsenal were all that bad. But yeah, Newcastle, they're flying. Isak, Gordon, yeah, looking pretty amazing.
Yeah, Arsenal accumulated over 4 XG in that game, but they were quite wasteful. If you watch the game, there was definitely at least 4 or 5 clear-cut chances they had. I think it was registered as 6 big chances in total, but you got to finish those chances. And Arsenal at the moment, without a proper number 9, without Saka, who's their most clinical finisher, Jesus obviously didn't start the game either. They were just lacking a little bit of that clinical nature. Newcastle were already impressive. So Isak and Gordon both scored. Murphy got the assist and the pre-assist as well, which was quite impressive. So he was really heavily involved. Yeah. I want to discuss Murphy because I think he's going slightly under the radar a little bit later. Isak, the only concern was Isak was subbed in the 65th minute. And it didn't look like an injury. But then after the game, Eddie Howe said Alex was feeling his hamstring at halftime, We had to manage him as we can't afford to lose him. Bear in mind that the last time he said Isak was struggling with a hamstring injury, he got 11 points against Liverpool.
Yeah, okay.
So Eddie Howe does love to lie. He said Gordon was struggling with a hamstring injury last season and Gordon got like a 17-pointer. So I wouldn't trust Eddie Howe too much. Let's see. He was never going to be involved this weekend in the FA Cup. So we're not going to take too much from that. But just keep an eye on anything, see if we get any training pictures and just monitor. If you were looking to bring in Isak, maybe you hold off a little bit. And then Gordon went off in the 75th minute. He had another really good game. He did look absolutely shattered, but again, he can just rest this weekend. I really like Anthony Gordon. You don't own Anthony Gordon either, do you?
I don't. That's the one player I think if I could pick to have in my team, it'd be him. Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. And then final bit of my ranting before we discuss sort of the games coming up. Spurs, Liverpool. Spurs 1, Liverpool 0. Spurs were much better in this game, but they still did give up chances. And I really don't want to discredit Spurs, because I often seem to do this when Spurs play well. I'm like, the other team weren't very good. But Liverpool really weren't fully at it. And if you look at Liverpool fans, there's a little bit of a worry right now, right? If you look at their results over the last 10 games, they've been exceptional. They've got some really big wins in there. And the games that they've drawn against Fulham and Newcastle, these are good teams, but they're just starting to show some, starting to show some cracks. They were so dominant. And even if you ignore goals conceded, if you ignore the results, it's the control of the football match. They were so in control. We said that it doesn't feel like Klopp anymore because Slot's just got this utter control over the game. It looks a bit more like Klopp at the moment. It's sort of very back and forth. So something to monitor. Spurs had 4 big chances in this game. Liverpool only the 3. Trent was benched and Diaz was benched. I'll let you decide whether this was rotation or whether this was just some of the players getting a little bit of a rest here. Obviously, Jota started, which was nice to see him get minutes. I just think we'll discuss Liverpool, but those attackers are so difficult to predict their minutes. The only one that seems to start almost every game at the moment is Cody Gakpo, but even him could get a rest. A big event was actually Quansah's injury. So he went off in like the 30th minute, which means that Konate now should be very nailed. The only concern is he's clearly not fully fit because when Quansah went off, it was Endo that came on at centre-back.
Yeah.
So that shows that in a big game, Konate isn't fit enough to get 70, 80 minutes, which kind of shows that he's not fully there with his fitness. But in the Premier League, you'd expect him to start. He'll probably get a rest again this weekend, or he'll play limited minutes and then he'll get pretty much every Prem game. He becomes a real option for us. We'll discuss Trent a bit later. You don't own him, and you're probably not overly stressed right now with all of the worries around Trent going on. Only thing on Spurs was the new keeper Kinski was unbelievably good. I've seen highlight reels of a goalkeeper, which isn't very common, but it wasn't as much the shot stopping, it was on the ball. You know, Fraser Force has been flapping. Even Brandon Austin wasn't as comfortable on the ball. And Vicario is good at points, but lots of mistakes. Kinski just looked class. He was chipping the ball over Salah's head. There was a few moments, but it's what you want from a keeper that stepped in first game. He's only been in training for like 2 sessions. Extremely good. Johnson was benched. Again, minutes are just such a risk, I think, with a lot of these attacks, like City attack, Liverpool attack, Spurs attack, some of their players, it's just, can you predict? But Solanke was so good again.
He was.
Did you see the goal that was ruled out?
I did. Yeah, Solanke's just steady Eddie, isn't he? You have him in your team and he'll just pick up points against anyone.
So boring, but so consistent. And there's nothing wrong with boring in FPL if that's the way you like to play. But yeah, I think his returns will continue. He's over something like 12 attacking returns in the Premier League. The only thing was bonus points, but as we saw last week, he can pick up the bonus points. So yeah, I think Spurs were really good. If you look at the bookies odds now, Newcastle are still now favourites to go through to the final, but Liverpool are still favourites ahead of Spurs. Yeah, so if the bookies are correct, it will be a Gameweek 29 blank for Newcastle, Palace, Aston Villa, and Liverpool. In terms of my own team, I've got Isak, I've got Mateta, I've got Munoz, I've got Rodgers, I've got Salah, and I've got Trent. So I've got 6 players that would be blanking. I think we've got like 8 game weeks now until they're 9 game weeks. So I can deal with that with transfers, but I'm also not ruling out the free hit. Do you have any early thoughts yourself, if it is roughly those teams blanking, about playing the free hit, how that wild card might fit into that strategy as well?
Yeah, I was thinking about the wild card, and because I have so few Liverpool players at the moment, I might use it for their double and then use the assistant manager as well, was my thinking. There's just so much that goes.
So you might use an early wild card. Is that around 25? Yeah, that's a potential.
Especially with Haaland still as well. I could, obviously selling him means I can completely restructure my team because his fixtures turn in a little bit.
And the thing is for you, selling Haaland, yeah, that's fine, 1 transfer, but then redistributing the funds requires 3, 4, 5 transfers often. So I agree in your position. I think another popular strategy might be to what we call dead end into 29. So use your transfers to build a decent team for the blank, and then you wild card out of that in 30. Because if Liverpool, Newcastle, and Palace all blank in 29, you'd be selling Isak, Salah, Trent, and they're players that you probably then want back, especially considering they will be the teams that double in 33. So this is where it starts to get a little bit confusing. This isn't a chip strategy pod by any means. there might be one of those coming very soon. But I just wanted to update you with the blank Gameweek21 situation, and hopefully that graphic on your screen has helped you out a little bit. So moving on to actually the main part of the pod then, which is to discuss the upcoming games for Gameweek21. If you watched last week's pod or listened to it, it's more of a preview style. So the first game is Brentford City, and we're just going to go through team by team and discuss some of the key players. Brentford are a bit of an enigma, aren't they, really? Like, sometimes I think they're incredible. Sometimes I think they're horrid. Sometimes I think they can defend well. Sometimes I think they're a defence to target. What do you make of Brentford? And in particular, talk to me about Brian Mbeumo.
Yeah, one of the things I'd say about Brentford is they always seem to show up in the big games against the top teams and do well. I think they've done City over a few times at the Etihad now. So yeah, and Mbeumo is just, I'd say he's killed me. He hasn't, because I sold him in order to bring Isak into my team. But I sold him in game week 14 when I think he had like one shot in 4 games. So there was almost justification to get rid of him. And then he's just completely proved us all wrong who have sold him. I'm guessing you maybe sold him at that
Absolutely.
time as well?
Every time a player has had limited shots, I feel like I want to keep them now, because every time I sell them, I remember the first one was Solanke before the Aston Villa 16-pointer. Solanke had one shot in 4 games and I sold him, and then he had a 16-pointer. And Mbeumo had one shot in 5 games, and then we said, well, he's not shooting, we're going to sell him, and then he's shot a ton. So yeah, every time I say, I think João Pedro is the next one who I'm saying, oh, he's not really shooting much. He'll probably go on and get like a 20-pointer now. But if you look at Mbeumo's underlying data, which is just the general quality of shots that he's getting, overall, he's still not getting a great deal of chances, but he's obviously very, very quality. And he is, what I would say about Mbeumo, and it's similar to Saka and it's similar to Cunha, they generate low XG chances, but chances that they know they can finish. Like Saka's shots when he cuts in off the right and shoots with his left foot, they tend to be about 0.1, 0.2 XG, but they're chances that he finishes well. And Mbeumo's very, very similar. He gets those clear-cut chances, which might not be 0.8 XG, but that Mbeumo will often finish. So I think he probably will overperform his data, but maybe not at the extent that we've seen. But yeah, he's just a flat track bully. So against Southampton this season, he's got 33 points in 2 games, which is remarkable. Wow. The only times this season that he's accumulated over 1 XGI was Southampton twice, Ipswich and Wolves. So I'm not saying that Mbeumo will likely have a lot of joy against Man City, but he's a flat track bully. Yeah. You get Mbeumo in an easy fixture, he's a captaincy option, right? He's done it this season against Ipswich, over 15 points. He's got a brace against Ipswich, a brace against Southampton, and then obviously the 19-pointer recently against Southampton too. He's got double digits against Wolves, West Ham. Like the scores that he gets, especially when he's at home, is so good. For those people that are looking for a mid-price midfielder this week, with some of the upcoming fixtures that Brentford have, how do you feel about Brian Mbeumo? Because it's obviously the next 2, Man City, Liverpool. Depending what Man City turn up, if it's the recent City, it's probably not a particularly bad game. But then it's Liverpool, and then after that it's Palace, Spurs, West Ham, Leicester. Can you jump on now, or do you think you'd prefer to jump on in 23?
I think I'd prefer to jump on later. But I guess one thing to say about Mbeumo is that for me, he just ticks all the boxes of a player you want in FPL. He plays every game pretty much for 90 minutes. He takes penalties. I'm pretty sure he's on free kicks as well.
Yeah.
So even in the tough games, he's got the penalties and the free kicks where he could nick something, even if he doesn't get the open play chances.
Yeah. Man City, actually in the Man City versus West Ham game, Man City conceded 17 shots to West Ham. 7, West Ham they didn't even have Jared Bowen in that game. So that's a Bowenless, and they didn't have their first choice left back game, and no Fabianski, of course. West Ham looked depleted, and I know the result looks great, but West Ham had their chances in that game. Pep actually said it's still not us about them after that one. So it's not a bad game for Mbeumo. I have no issue with buying him this week. No issue. If someone said, I just think Mbeumo is a better long-term hold than someone like a Gordon. Yeah, maybe. And the thing is, Mbeumo's not going to blank in 29. Gordon's looking like he could. And I know that is such a long way away, and it'll probably start to annoy people that I keep looking ahead to getting him. He's 29 and 33.
You need to think that far.
Exactly.
In advance,
because free transfers are so valuable. And if you're looking to play the assistant manager chip, which is coming up soon, you might need transfers for the manager. So I actually think if you were to ask me, I could only own one of Mbeumo or Gordon for the next 8 to 10 games. I'd go Mbeumo.
Fair enough.
But if you were to ask me for the next 4, I'd prefer Gordon.
Okay.
So it depends, I think, what you're looking for and from that player and how long the horizon is that you think you'll own them. A player that's a lot more interesting to me because of the position and price is Wissa. He's good.
He is good. Yeah, absolutely. And I like his price point. There's so many good forwards around that price. It's just picking which one's best. Chris Wood's done the business for me so far. But obviously, Wissa is a perfectly decent alternative.
Yeah, 6.2 million. So he's more than the likes of Rao and João Pedro, but cheaper than Chris Wood, Cunha, etc. At that price, a little bit more expensive, Mateta. I just really like the idea of him. If I need to free up some funds going for a Wissa from 23 and beyond, he again is a bit of a flat track bully. He's a big chance hogger. We spoke about him in the previous podcast, though. In the lead up to this game, his data had fallen off a cliff a little bit, and it was 0.15 over the previous 8 game weeks, his XG. So it was looking like Whistle was a sell, and then he comes along with a goal and an assist. He should have had more. He had 1.38 XG in that game. Really should have had 2 or 3 goals. There was a couple of clear-cut chances.
Yeah, I saw him miss a big one-on-one, didn't he? Yeah,
exactly. And he does that. He's not a perfect finisher, but I just think that Brentford team will always score goals. Even if they go on a bad run of games, even if the fixtures aren't perfect, you never expect Brentford to fail to score in a game.
Absolutely.
And if they do, the next game they bounce back with a big score. So I guess what I'm saying is I've no issue buying Wissa and Mbeumo this week. We're going to discuss City in a second, but they're struggling. Liverpool are still conceding goals and chances at the moment. And then you go into Crystal Palace and Spurs, and then a much better run of fixtures after that. And again, prepping for Gameweek 29, they're a team that you can... I actually can't remember who they play in 29, but I don't think it's an awful fixture. Yeah, Bournemouth away. I mean, it's not a fixture you want to target, but if you had Wissa and Mbeumo in a blank game week, yeah, you're absolutely fine with that. So, yeah, basically, I think they're both absolutely fine. I think that's mainly it on Brentford. Just to say, by the way, they accumulated 11 big chances in that game. 11 big chances in a single game is the second highest we've seen in a game this season. I don't think I need to discuss that in relation to Brentford. I think that's more of a Southampton thing, which I'll discuss when we move on to Southampton towards the end of the pod. But yeah, Brentford are absolute flat track bullies in those kind of games. So yeah, on City, they conceded the 17 shots against West Ham. Pep afterwards said, it's still not us. We're still not playing the way I would want. And again, if you watch the Leicester game, if you watch the Everton game, if you watch the West Ham game, the results look okay, but the performances are anything but. And I don't watch that and want to own City players. You own Erling Haaland. What's the plan with Erling Haaland? Is it keep him for 2 more? Is it sell him after this game?
I think, stay open. But to be honest, the fixtures do turn in the next 2 or 3. And looking at this game week, as I've probably said before, I think Salah with Nottingham Forest, which we'll obviously get onto, versus Haaland against Brentford, I think there's a real justification to captain him. And I think in my position where I have him, not a lot of other players do, certainly around my rank, I think it's a good opportunity. But yeah, honestly, outside of Haaland, I've written a few names down, but I wouldn't consider any other City players.
What other names, what other players do you think would be a consideration?
Guardiola. Every time I see Guardiola play, he gets a chance to score, pretty much. Even if City play poorly, he's always in the box on the end of a corner or a cross or something like that. I put down Foden and Savio as well, or Savinho. I think they could be decent, but they're just not quite as good as Gordon or Mbeumo, for sure. Yeah,
Savio. So Savio's an interesting one because he's underlying data is really strong, and every time he plays, he's so impressive. So he started the last 3, 0.56 XGI, 0.66, 0.74. His bonus points potential is through the roof. He's got one of the best baseline bonus points in the Premier League because he's so creative. 4 assists in 2 games. But his minutes just aren't secure. And he's done this before. Like he started 2 games back-to-back in 11 and 12, and then he was benched for 2 consecutive games, then started, then benched for 2 consecutive games. And I know he struggled a little bit with fitness at points, but it's just like, is his upside high enough to want to take that risk? I know he's just got 2 big point scores, but especially with their fixtures coming up after the next couple of games. So they've got Brentford and Ipswich away, which are both good fixtures. But then it's Chelsea, Arsenal, Newcastle, Liverpool. They are at the moment 4 of the best 5 defences in the league for expected goals conceded. So they honestly couldn't get much more difficult unless you chuck Nottingham Forest in there. So I just don't think I'd really want to go there.
Exactly, yeah.
For those that own Foden, you absolutely keep him for the next 2. And I think if you own Lewis or Gvardiol, you keep him for the next 2. But I don't know that I could sit here right now and say I would go out and buy a City player. No. So I think it's hold, keep for the next 2, hope they do really well. If in the next 2, City improve their performances and the results go alongside it, then maybe there's some justification to just hold on a little bit longer. I just don't think you do. And especially you, I know you're sat there right now, probably okay with your team, but you're thinking if I sell Haaland,
my just do so much.
Yeah, my squad looks so much better. Cool. Right, so I think that's it on Brentford Man City. I did this with Leon, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because I haven't told you this, but we'll predict each of the results.
I was going to ask your prediction. Cool.
Okay, right. I'll go first then because I made Leon go first every time, which isn't a very good host of me. Brentford City, I'm going to go 2-2.
I'll go 3-2 Man City for that one.
Yeah, I was tempted. I'm just thinking, can City score 3 goals? But maybe, yeah. So 2-2, 3-2. We basically think there's going to be a lot of goals in this game, which is great if you own the likes of Haaland, Foden, and Savinho. Perfect. Right, next game is Chelsea versus Bournemouth. I have no idea which way this is going to go because Chelsea have been on a 4-game winless streak right now. They're struggling a little bit. And as a result, a lot of the assets that we own are starting to tailor off a little bit, the likes of Jackson and Enzo. Obviously, 1 return in 7 game weeks for Jackson. And in 6 of those games, out of the 7, he's played fewer than 75. So you've got a man that's not returning and not getting great minutes, and he's been benched in 2 of those 7. If you owned... You don't own Jackson, do you?
No.
If you owned Jackson, Would you sell him? If so, who to? Or do you think you'd hold for a little bit longer?
I had so many questions about this myself in the comments section on my streams. It's very easy to say this when you don't have him, but I think an underrated thing in FPL sometimes is patience. Sticking with a player that you know can score goals and I guess he'll play in midweek next week. You'd imagine the rotation comes this weekend.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's so hard to say. I think I'll probably keep him, just give him another game. And then that's the final nail in the coffin to get rid of him, I think, if he doesn't do anything.
I'm glad you mentioned the midweek because so technically their game is Tuesday against Bournemouth, but they've got the FA Cup the weekend before. And then actually Chelsea have the best turnaround in terms of the next fixture, which isn't until Monday the 20th. So assuming that he doesn't start in the FA Cup or gets 50 minutes, 60 minutes, he will then play the Bournemouth game. And then it's 6 days before the Wolves game. And then it's Saturday for the Man City game. So there's enough of a turnaround. The next time that Jackson will be benched, my prediction anyway, would be Wednesday, the 26th of February, because it's a midweek game and it's Southampton at home. And he was already benched for the midweek game against Southampton earlier in the season. So that would be my prediction about the next time that Jackson's going to be benched. I just don't think I could sell a player with the amount of chances that he gets playing in such a decent attack with Bournemouth and Wolves at home in the next two. They're actually pretty decent fixtures, especially considering they're at home. Beyond that, I think that a really popular transfer in 23 might be Jackson to Wissa, because I think he goes into the City game, then it's West Ham, but then it's Brighton away, Villa away. That set of 4 fixtures isn't quite as good, but then City and West Ham, we're going to discuss West Ham because obviously Potter coming in might make a difference, but I basically think I would hold Jackson for the next 2, and then I would look to move him on to someone like Wissa in 23. Let's say you hold Jackson for 21, and again, he's stinking, plays 70 minutes, looks awful. Then you've got Chris Wood against Southampton in 22.
Yeah.
So I think you've got lots of outs for Jackson. All of them are cheaper than him. But as Tom and I have said, and I actually spoke about this with Tom and Haaland off camera, when you don't own a player, it's very easy to give advice. Like it's easy for us to sit here and say keep him. It's easy for me to say to Tom, I'd captain Haaland. But until you're in that situation, it's very difficult to know. So I'll tentatively say I would keep, but I understand the frustration. I sold João Pedro a few weeks ago and he's gone on and done really well.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I know people at the time that didn't own were like, no, I'd probably keep him. So it's very easy to hand out that kind of advice. The other player that I would love some advice on from you is Enzo. So he's got 0 returns in 4 game weeks. He's not really doing it. How do you feel about making transfers with these cheap assets? There's 2 schools of thoughts. One is that you just keep the cheap assets that you've got in midfield, Rodgers, Enzo, and just hold them and hope they do well. Semenyo, whoever it is. And then one is that you move them around based on fixtures. Where do you sort of sit on that?
Yeah, I've said this a few times in my videos. I think there's probably 4 or 5 at that price point you can pick. And my view at the time was you pick them and just stick with them. And one will score one week, others will score another week. And you'll feel jealous of not owning the ones that score, etc. But Enzo in particular, what kind of positions? I haven't watched him because he's not in my team really. Has he been as advanced as he was when people were bringing him in?
So he's still having moments in the game where he's further forward than Cole Palmer. He's had moments where he's further forward than Jackson. But the big issue is that when we all brought him in 4 game weeks ago or 5 game weeks ago, at that point, the 5 before that, Lavia had been starting. And for most of them, Caicedo had been right back inverting into midfield. So we'd had Lavia and Caicedo alongside each other, which pushed Enzo into this basically like dual 10 role with Cole Palmer. And that's when he had 5 returns in a row. The week that we all bought him, Lavia got injured, comes out the team. And so I do think that the absence of Lavia has affected his goal threat. If you look at his assist threat, though, he's 3rd for expected assists out of all midfielders in the game over the last 4 game weeks. So he's been massively underperforming because the likes of Jackson and Cucurella, who's missed like 2 big chances assisted by Enzo, they've not finished the chances. The good thing is Lavia's back in training. I am very much of the same opinion of you now. I wasn't a few weeks ago. I was like, yeah, go out and get Sarr, go out and get Ahmad. But as soon as people bought Sarr and Ahmad, then Rodgers starts returning when people sold him. Even Semenyo has been getting the return. So I am probably of the opinion, maybe what you should do is get the midfielders you want first and then hold them. I'm not saying you should sit there with Dibbling and Semenyo if you're not happy with them. But once you've got 2 that you think are good, then leave it.
Absolutely.
So I think there is higher upside transfers to make, like going for a Gordon in midfield than switching Enzo to Sarr or Enzo to Ahmad. So I think if you've got 2 that you think are good footballers, good players, good assets, maybe keep them. And for me, Enzo he's on set pieces, he's on free kicks, corners, he's got good assist threat, he's created 3 big chances in the last 3 weeks. Lavia's back in training, and Chelsea are a great attack. So for me, Enzo's a fine keep.
Absolutely.
On the flip side, if someone said, I really want to go out there and attack Ahmad versus Southampton or Sarr versus Leicester, I don't think we'd advise not to do it, essentially. Or would you say?
I'd probably say not to. I'd say, well, it depends what your plans are after that. If it's a short-term pick to play a chip or something afterwards, then fair enough. But I just like to stay impatient with these players that we know are pretty good.
And these transfers, honestly, I can't begin to tell you how much you're going to need transfers coming up. Because again, 24 is the assistant manager chip. If you want to use it that early, you might choose to use it later, in which you can use up to 2 transfers to take the manager out each time. You've then got the probable Liverpool double in 25, the blank game week in 29. And this is assuming you're not obviously playing free hits and wildcards, but even so, you're still going to need free transfers. And that's not even discussing random injuries. And by the way, we've had random news today, like João Pedro's twisted his ankle in training, as we'll discuss when we move on to it. So yeah, I would say, unless you need a transfer right now, or unless you really want to attack, as boring as it is, just probably don't make the move. And we've seen recently with Rodgers, with João Pedro, that these players can often return after you sell them.
And speaking about injuries, like the worst possible scenario is you make one of these, I call them luxury transfers, from Enzo to Ahmad, and then Ahmad gets injured or something like that.
And then that's like 2 transfers to have made what was in the first place a luxury move. Cool. I would just say on Chelsea's defence, for those that own like Colwill, Sanchez, they're still 4th for non-penalty expected goals conceded. I know people don't like XG data, but what this means is they're not actually giving up that many chances. And every team does. Even Arsenal in their prime, last season when they were just a joke, they still give up chances. And Sanchez is a great shot stopper. He's terrible with the ball at his feet. Like, this is why Chelsea fans hate him. But as a shot stopper, he's fine. And so I do think that Chelsea will keep clean sheets coming up. I wouldn't buy them, but I would definitely hold them. And I think moving forward, obviously against Bournemouth, it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
But I think moving forward, I'd be fine having for at least a few more weeks the likes of Sanchez and Colwill, especially if Arsenal don't make the final, because then Chelsea will actually play in Gameweek 29. And who do they have? I have to keep checking. I keep forgetting who these players have.
There's so much going on, isn't there?
In Gameweek 29, it was Arsenal. Oh yeah, of course it's Arsenal. But it's still better than having no player, especially if you're not using the free hits. Yeah, I think Chelsea, basically, I wouldn't go out there and buy any Chelsea players right now, but I wouldn't be selling any of your Chelsea players if it was me. Cool. On Bournemouth, a team that I just want to own assets from, but I don't think I've owned a Bournemouth asset at any point this season, which is a real shame because they are absolutely flying. 6th for expected goals conceded, 6th for expected goals. Big news though on the injury front. Evan-Ilson has fractured his foot and he's out until March. And then just as we were saying, Unal might be an option at 5.4, he's done his ACL in training. So you've got no Evan-Ilson until March, no Unal for the rest of the season. So Jebison, £4.5 million forward, has been recalled from his loan. He couldn't get in the squad at Watford though, because apparently he was absolutely terrible. So if a player isn't good enough to play for Watford, I don't imagine he'll be the starting striker for Bournemouth. So I think they've got 3 options. Semenyo as the 9, Kluivert as the 9, and then go and buy a forward. It sounds like they're going to try and buy a forward. In terms of who I think will play as the 9, sounds more likely to be Kluivert, actually.
Okay.
I've spoken to various Bournemouth fans and also the tweet from FPL Schofield. He's going to actually be on the podcast very soon as well. But he's a massive Bournemouth fan and he said Semenyo's actually struggled a little bit as the 9 before.
Fair enough.
But Kluivert's pretty decent there. He's played through the centre this season as like the number 10. So if you've got Kluivert playing as the 9, the issue is Chelsea, Newcastle, Forest in the next 3. They are 3 of the best 5 defences in the league. You've got Semenyo.
I do.
How do you feel about Semenyo? Is this like a really good excuse to say those 3 fixtures are terrible, we sell him? Or are you of the same opinion that we just spoke about where you just keep Semenyo?
I got to take my own advice on that one, I think. It's so, because in this position, it's so tempting to want to get rid of him, particularly when you see Ahmad with Southampton coming up. I think I'll probably keep him, but with a watchful eye this week to see exactly how he's playing. If he's the number 9, I think it's going to be hard to justify getting rid of him.
I think it also depends on like where your squad's at. If you're sat there with 4 free transfers and a great squad, then the luxury moves are more justified. But if you're sat there with 2 free transfers, potential injuries, flag players, a weak bench, 1 Liverpool ahead of their upcoming double, then you probably sat there thinking not a priority transfer, especially if you can rotate him out. Like you don't have to start him every week. I know for you that's a potential option as well. You play a 4 at the back. You can play obviously players like Dibbling or Rodgers instead. So would I sell Semenyo? I think it's a good excuse with the 3 fixtures coming up. But at the same time, I'd quite like to see a game without Evan-Ilson. It might be that in general, it just makes their attack so much weaker. It might be that they can't function without a 9 and they really struggle. But that's something to assess. He was actually involved in 3 big chances against Everton. Very unlucky to come away with nothing. That was one of those all-timer blanks where it's like, did you watch the highlights from that game? He really should. It was just one of those where I was wincing watching the highlights after the game, even after the game and knowing that he didn't. But I was just watching like, how does this man come away? But he's like that, isn't he? Sometimes.
Yeah. I have 2 teams. I follow Bristol City as well because I live near the stadium, and he started at Bristol City and moved to Bournemouth.
Oh, okay.
He was great. He was pretty dominant, to be honest, in the Championship. But one thing he could never do was finish properly. His option was only to blast it and not really control his finishes. So I think that's he's definitely improved, but that's something you've got to put up with, I think, with Semenyo.
Yeah, I think the only other two assets to discuss is their defenders, which is Howson and Kirkers, I think the main two. Howson's, I think, still only 4.4 million. He's already on 11 bonus points this season, which is pretty impressive considering he's only started 9 games. So it's 3 bonus points on 3 occasions. I think 2 of those with a goal, 1 of those with a clean sheet. Great for bonus, cheap, insane in the air. Looks like a bit of a fitness monster as well, doesn't need a rest.
Yeah.
Senesi's still nowhere near being fit and available.
I think he'll struggle to get back into the team, to be honest.
That was going to be my question to you. Does Senesi get back into the team?
I think it'll struggle. Yeah.
Probably not, at least not straight away. So you've probably got Howson until March at the earliest. I mean, the season ends in May, and you're probably looking to play your wild card around mid-March anyway. So I think Howson's an excellent buy.
Yeah.
I'd probably have him up there along with the Fulham defenders we'll discuss in a second. Below 4.5, he's got to be top 3 defenders to own. It's just those fixtures. We just spoke about Chelsea, Newcastle, Forest. I wouldn't want to play him against Chelsea or Newcastle. I actually wouldn't mind playing him against Forest because as much as they're doing very well, they're not the best attack. So that's the sort of Forest at home is a game I'd be happy to play him. What do you make of Kirkers? Because I keep saying I prefer other defenders ahead of him, and he keeps making a bit of a mockery of me saying that.
Yeah, he's just one of many. I think the thing is with defenders at that price point, I think you've got probably 3 that I'd have as my top 3. Milenkovic, Hall, and Munoz. And if you have all 3 of those, or perhaps don't fancy them, then maybe Kirkers is the one. But I just think he's got a few players that are better than him, to be honest.
Yeah, I said I prefer Fulham defenders, Hall, Munoz, and Forest defenders.
Yeah.
So it's no dig at Kirkers. It's just like if I'm going to buy a Bournemouth defender, I'd go cheaper at Howson for the goal threat. Okay, right. I'll let you go first this time. Chelsea versus Bournemouth.
Score prediction. Ooh. I'll say 2-0 to Chelsea.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to go 1-1. I think Bournemouth are a very good team. I think Chelsea's good run of form might come moving on after this. I just think Bournemouth have just looked so good this season, but I will just know I think they might struggle without a focal point.
That's what I was thinking.
So we'll see. And that hopefully, I mean, I've got Sanchez in goal, so hopefully you are right, and hopefully you can get me a clean sheet. Cool. Next game, West Ham versus Fulham. So the big news: Lopetegui has been sacked, and as of this morning, Graham Potter has been appointed. That's a good appointment.
I think that's a good appointment, yeah.
But
Absolutely.
why didn't they do that previously? That would be my question. Because there was rumours, obviously, when they signed, I think, Lopetegui, that Graham Potter was available. You go and do that first. Like, Graham Potter is, it may be a bit hindsight here, but Graham Potter was obviously the appointment. Maybe there was a reason it wasn't possible at the time. Graham Potter's played loads of formations in the past. 3-4-2-1 has been his main formation, but he's played 4-4-2. I'll be very interested to see what he gets from that West Ham team, and where he plays Kudus is probably going to be the most interesting thing. Any assets of any interest to you for West Ham?
Not right now, but I really like Nicholas Füllkrug. I think he's a fantastic.
That is a shout.
And yeah, if Potter can get them playing the right system where they feed him chances, I think he'll come good. I just remember every time I saw him play for Dortmund or even Germany, he's had chances. He's really clinical as well. I really like Füllkrug.
Far too many Bundesliga attackers that just don't do it in the Premier League, isn't there? And I don't even think it's because the Bundesliga is a bad league, by the way, or a weak league. I think it's just such a different style of football. Like when you watch it, it's almost the attackers have more space, but that doesn't make it easier. It just gives them more freedom and creativity. Whereas in the Prem, everyone's pressing so high and giving you no space. It just feels a little bit more sort of fast paced and a little bit more intense. The only other West Ham player to mention is actually Fabianski. So he's expected to return after his concussion protocol for this game week. I was getting ready. I'd actually made the notes to say I'm fully expecting him to come back in as the number 1. That was when Lopetegui was manager, though. Who's to say that Potter doesn't come in and say, actually, I want Areola as my number 1? Obviously, quite a bit younger. I think, how old is Areola? I won't type in Areola on Google.
No, be careful with
that would come up with. But he's 31. Obviously, Fabianski's almost 40, I think. So maybe he just comes in and says, do you know what? I want Areola as my number 1. He's going to be the one that starts for West Ham. But you would say this season, Fabianski's been very impressive since he came in. So Fabianski's fit and available, but Areola might be the one that goes in, and that's now all over my search history. Nice one, Ross. Moving on very swiftly to Fulham. Lots of players to potentially consider. So Fulham have been continuing with this 5 at the back with Castagna and Robinson as the wing backs. Let's say you were buying afresh at the moment. Do you save the 0.8 and go for Castagna, or do you still think Robinson justifies that extra money? Or would you just not be looking at the Fulham defenders?
I'll be honest. I've written down here. Going forwards, I think Robinson's good from an attacking perspective for FPL points. And I think defensively, him on his own, he's really good. But I don't massively back Fulham defensively.
Okay, so you think there'll be a bit of a drop-off coming up?
Yeah, I just in general, I just think they keep conceding goals. I'm not massive on them. I don't know how many clean sheets they have this season, but
Not many. And they're one of those teams that so they're 6th for expected goals conceded. So every time you look at their underlying data, you say it's not too bad, and then they concede. And it reminds me of Man City in the past. I always say Man City are the best team in the league for expected goal. And there are people about like Edison concedes every week. So they do just find a way. But when I look at it on paper, I don't rate Bassey particularly, but Anderson, Robinson, Leno. Like Leno in goal is the thing that makes me think Fulham are just a good defense because they've got a good keeper.
Yeah.
And that's what I always come back to is like, if they've got a good shot stopper in goal, I fancy them to do well. But as you say, how long do you keep going, they've got good underlying data before saying they don't keep the same level of clean sheets? Even as someone like an Everton, I would still save the money and go Castagna just because of how tight money is. If we were at a point in the season where we had like 108 million team value and we had more money, maybe, but they're playing very similar roles. Now, what I will say is that Robinson, I would say, is a little bit more central and a little bit higher up the pitch. But Castagna is playing like a traditional wing back, and he's getting the opportunity to get in at the back post, whip in crosses. On the 5 at the back, I spoke to a Fulham fan. This could be completely right. It could be that a Fulham fan knows absolutely nothing. I won't name them. But they said that potentially the reason for the 5 at the back is that Sander Berg isn't available right now. And that when he comes back in, it gives them that extra midfielder and they can go back to at 4 at the back. Okay. So it might be that that's the case. When that happens, Anderson isn't at risk. It will be Diop that comes out, and it will be Bassey and Anderson as the centre-backs. So all of that to say, whether it's a 4 at the back or a 5 at the back, Castagna and Robinson are fine. Fixtures are interesting because I've been saying that after the next few, they're not great for Fulham. They're actually not that bad. So they've got West Ham, Leicester, United, fine. Newcastle was a very tricky game. Then it's Forest and Palace at home for 25-26. I still think Fulham defenders are actually really decent buys. But as Tom says, they need to start actually keeping the clean sheets to go with it. So we'll see. And Robinson's rate of 7 assists, it's not going to continue.
I don't think so. No.
When you look at his expected assists, there's been a lot of like 0.1 expected assists that have been converted. So temper your expectations, but I think Castagna's a really nice cheap option. What do you make of Raul Jimenez? Such a difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah, I sold him a few weeks back because I saw Muniz was scoring goals off the bench and I was really worried about his minutes. And then even though Muniz was scoring off the bench, Marco Silva persisted with starting Jimenez. So you must really like him. And it's just try not to get carried away with that, obviously, a couple of penalties and stuff. I like him. I guess given that João Pedro's been injured as well, is injured at the moment, he's probably the one to go for out of those two. But I've sold him, so I can't say I'm massive on him.
It feels like it's going to be obvious in hindsight. People bring him in and go, well, obviously Muniz was there waiting. Or you'll bring him in, he'll do really well, start every game, and it'll be like, yeah, well, he was first choice. So I don't like those hindsighty comments, but I don't know what to make of Raul Jimenez. I think every week on FPL Therapy, I change my opinion. Great data on penalties, starts most games, playing for one of the better teams in the league at the moment in Fulham, with West Ham and Leicester in the next 2. If you were to list me those things without much context around it, I'd go buy him straight away. But he actually got 90 minutes in Game Week 20 for the first time since Game Week 9.
Okay.
So that shows that he's not a 90-minute man, not anywhere close, because Muniz actually came on for a Iwobi in the 63rd minute. I don't think it looked particularly good with Muniz and Jimenez. They're very similar players. So I don't think that will happen a lot. Maybe Iwobi just needed a rest, or maybe that Marco Silva just thought 2 of our best goal scorers on the pitch at that time. I think he gets benched in one of the next 3 or 4. So I think if you're happy getting 3 out of 4 games with Jimenez, and when he starts him getting 70 minutes, then great. And the penalties are really nice. And he's playing at quite a high level right now. But I wouldn't bet on him starting every game is all I would say. What do you think people should do with Iwobi? I know we've just sat there and said, don't move around the cheap midfielders, but his data stinks, doesn't it? And a 63rd minute sub, there's not much goal threat. Do you still think with him you keep him for the next few and then reassess given the fixtures, or do you think he'd be one you'd be happy to transfer out?
Yeah, I mentioned for me there's like 4 or 5 at that price point that I think are pickable. And I don't think I put Iwobi in that 4 or 5. So for that reason, he's the one I'd probably get rid of.
Absolutely.
The ones that are owned.
Like if someone said list the top 5 cheap midfielders, I think Rodgers, Ahmad, Murphy, Sarr, Enzo, probably the 5. And Iwobi wouldn't creep into my mind until someone mentioned him. And I go, yeah, Iwobi's not bad. And I know we spoke about him 4 weeks ago, but it was ahead of Southampton at home and really nice fixtures. And I know the next 2 aren't bad, but at some point you've just got to say he's just not really doing it. I think if you've got other issues to sort out, it's absolutely fine keeping him for this week, but he's not a player that I'd be looking to bring in. Cool. West Ham, Fulham. Remember West Ham under Potter for this one. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, it's new manager bounce, or do they continue to be terrible? I think it's going to be a bit of a new manager bounce. I'll say I think Fulham win. I'll go 2-1 Fulham. I think West Ham find a way to score.
I'm going to predict back-to-back 1-1s. I agree. I think new manager bounce. Potter can be quite a conservative manager, but I also think he'll get something out of that attack a little bit. But maybe without Bowen, they might struggle. I reckon Kudus grabs the goal. Muniz grabs the goal 1-1. That's my prediction right there.
Fair enough.
Cool. Next game. Oh, this is going to be an absolute cracker based on league position and the performances recently. We've got Forest versus Liverpool. Talk to me about Wood. We've had Areolas. Now we're going to move on to Wood. What do you make of Chris Wood?
Yeah, I woke up this morning with Wood.
I woke up this morning with Wood as well. Let us know if you woke up this morning with Wood. Continue.
He's brilliant, isn't he?
He's so funny to watch because I was just watching him. He's done nothing, and then the ball just drops to him from a few yards out, and he just taps it in against Wolves. And it's like, yeah, that's what he does.
And they're set up perfectly to play with a striker that does that as well. I think. Yeah, I think he's brilliant. And yeah, I think he's got, how many did he score last season? I think he scored 14 goals from 20 games last season. Wow. And this year he scored 11, 12, something like that.
Yeah, you're right. 14 goals and an assist in 20 games last season. This season he had 19, he started 19 games and he's got 12 goals already.
Yeah, so if you add that up, you've got 20 plus 19, so 39 games in how many goals? 24, 25?
33 goals.
Yeah. That's like 39 games is like the course of a season, and he scored that many goals.
He's basically almost getting a goal a game, which is ridiculous, right? And as you say, I'm glad you pointed that out because I've been saying it's unsustainable, but he did it last season.
That's what he does.
Yeah, so maybe it's not. I'm now a Chris Wood lover. I was a Chris Wood hater earlier on the podcast. If people have watched my content all season, I've been hating on Chris Wood. I bought him last week, and I now love him. And actually, I think when you own him, you start to appreciate that he's not just a tap-in merchant. His hold-up play is very good. His passing's actually pretty decent. Yeah. He's good in the air. Like, he's actually a top striker. And being in the right position at the right time is quite underrated. I liked what you said about being set up for Chris Wood because I think Alanga, Gibbs White, Hudson-Odoi are sensational. I think those three, the pace they have, the ability to dribble, to have three players that can carry the ball as well as those three on the counter, especially with Anderson as well, those four, their ball carrying abilities are like, I would say like top 20 players in Europe, the four of them together. So I would love to recommend all three of them. I think in terms of an FPL asset, they got similar minutes. I actually think Alanga would be the standout for me. He's always got really good underlying data. He's more of a goal threat. Hudson-Odoi's data is always a bit rubbish. And whilst his minutes have been slightly better than Alanga, the underlying data and the lack of goal threat would put me off slightly. But the one that really stands out is Gibbs White. So Gibbs White has 6 returns in 6 weeks. I said on the podcast last week, and I'm so glad I said it before he got another, Gibbs White has just been ignored for no good reason. Another return. Any interest? Is a bit of a tricky price, but I think 6.4 million.
6.4. I think, his price point is difficult. I think you may as well go for, in my opinion, for one of the cheaper ones, or Gordon or Mbeumo, I think. But yeah, no disrespect to Gibbs White. I think he's great. If that sort of price point works perfectly for you, then go for him.
I quite like it. Alanga's 5.2, by the way. Started 4 games in a row, but he's got 63, 73, 90, 69. So 3 of those are less than 75 minutes. Hudson-Odoi started every game apart from the last one, but got like 89, 90 minutes in them. So if you're looking for a minutes guy, Hudson-Odoi's have been better thus far. Alanga's are slightly weaker, but I feel like he's just got a little bit more in terms of goal threat and assist threat. And then Gibbs White's probably the one to go for. But Chris Wood, fantastic. Just on Chris Wood, would you have any issue starting him this week against Liverpool? And like, let's say you've got like a Rodgers, let's say you've got Semenyo. Like, do you just start him ahead of all of these players, or?
I think I say this on my deadline streams when people ask these questions. I always kind of back the penalty taker because I think that adds just a little edge. So yeah, if you're stuck, maybe Rodgers is difficult actually. So Wood v Rodgers is tough. We won't talk about that. But if you got Wood versus Semenyo or something like that, I'd back the penalty taker and go for Wood.
We saw that with João Pedro, as we'll move on to getting the goal. He didn't have a shot in that Arsenal game other than the penalty, and he comes away with 9 points. So penalty takers are king. We saw it with Delap. We saw it with Raul Jimenez. Yeah. We saw it with even Mohamed Salah. Got the penalty. So yeah, I agree. I would tend to back the penalty taker. Let's talk about their defense then. This is the point when you have a big smile on your face and you're free to gloat. So you've got Sells and Aina. How good are their defense?
Yeah, fantastic. What, they third best defense in the league. And I think it's a Nuno. Nuno loves a team that's like defensive first, and he did it with Wolves. Yeah, brilliant. To be honest, I've only had double for the last couple of weeks. But I think of all the teams that have sort of cheap defenders amongst them, they're by far and away the best.
Yeah, so they started in a back 4 against Wolves on Monday night. They then switched to a back 5 and brought on Morato, and they, in both systems, just looked insanely good. And I know Cunha wasn't playing, and they did give up chances, but they're just very, very solid. I've been saying for weeks now, fixtures aren't quite there. I probably wouldn't go to just bring him in. Yeah. Just at this stage, they are fantastic assets to own, and they keep clean sheets in difficult games. We've seen that already. Went to Anfield and beat Liverpool 1-0. So I think, okay, let me ask you this question. I know you're an Ola Aina lover. He's 5.2, Milenkovic 4.8, and then Williams 4.3. Where would you be going right now if you were buying one? Do you still think Aina's worth the money, or do you go to Milenkovic?
I'll be honest, no. I think Milenkovic is the one. And when you look at I haven't really compared the two because I haven't needed to recently, but when you look at their attacking data, when I was deciding between the two of them, yeah, I think Milenkovic's attacking data is better than Aina.
You're spot on, yeah. So Milenkovic has 0.17 XGI per 90. Ola Aina only 0.09. So Ola Aina's data is actually pretty rubbish, but he can strike a ball.
Yeah.
I actually used to play for Ola Aina at Chelsea and Spurs. So we're the same age group. I think he might be slightly older, but we played together at Spurs and Chelsea. He was a right winger at the time.
Okay.
And then he moved to Chelsea whilst I was still at Spurs. And so I played left back against him at right wing, and he terrorized me. I'm pretty sure he got like 2 goals and made me look it was like salary against some of the left backs we've seen this season. So I know Ola Aina quite well as a footballer. But he used to be a right winger and now a right back. And you can tell that when he's on the ball. When they play wing back roles, he's very comfortable with the ball at his feet. So he's a great player, but I don't know that I could spend 5.2. And Milenkovic is such a boss in the air. Like he's got that huge Gabriel feeling about him where he just attacks everything. By the way, it was actually Murillo that picked up 3 bonus in this game, a player that doesn't get mentioned, but he's a little bit shorter. Yeah. Doesn't have that same ability in the air. So yeah, Milenkovic is the one, but keep an eye on Williams at that cheap price as well. If you're looking sub 5 million, I'm just going on to the FPL site to look. I think he started either 5 or 6 in a row now. So he started every game since 15 and got 19 all of them apart from the Everton game.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And only 4.3 million. And actually, when you look at his underlying data, it's better than Ola Aina.
Right.
So I can't sit here and say that he definitely starts every game for the future.
They got Moreno as well, haven't they? I guess.
Exactly. But why they've kept 4 clean sheets in a row? Why on earth are you taking him out when they're doing so well? So yeah, maybe he's a shout as well. Cool. So yeah, Forest looking really good. On Liverpool, we spoke about them already. I don't really know if they're on a dip, if it's just naturally not going to perform well in every single game. On Trent, you can give us an unbiased opinion because you don't own. I think it's a little bit easier. How should we feel about Trent? Should we be worried? I mean, Bradley starts this big game. Let's say Trent starts against Accrington Stanley this weekend. That's a concern, probably. But is it enough of a concern to sell, or do you think you keep and wait?
I think you've got this period of uncertainty. I think you just have to ride it out and keep him because of all of the Liverpool defenders, he's the best in my opinion. And I think, if he doesn't start the Forest game, then it's time to be a little bit worried. But I think you've got to stick with.
Yeah, I think you've got 2 games probably against Forest and Brentford where you can stick. Let's say that even Bradley starts against Forest, but might not have the best game, and then Trent comes on and looks good. Then he maybe starts against Brentford. Because where you really want Trent is Ipswich in 23 at home, great fixture, and then that double, which will be in 24 or 25. Yeah. So I think hold for those 2. And if in 23, Trent's only got like 100 minutes across those 2 games, Bradley's playing really well, just sell him for Konate. You've got a really easy out there, even to Van Dijk if you want to, or even to Bradley if Bradley's getting starts on a regular basis. But it would probably be just Trent to Konate. I think with moves like this, I want to see evidence that Trent is not first choice.
Yeah.
Because until that, my prior belief is Trent is first choice. Until you show me evidence that Trent isn't first choice, I think it would be hasty to sell him before that. So I think I'm going to keep Trent. But if you're sat there without Isak, or you're sat there without Gordon or Palmer, and you think these assets are going to be better, I guess I don't mind selling him. I probably would go down to Konate. Because Quantzas obviously came off injured. I just don't see Konate being rotated. I mean, Endo did actually a fine job when he came on at centre-back, but I don't expect that to be common in the Premier League. And I think he probably builds up his fitness over the next couple, Konate, and I'd still expect him to start both in the double.
The thing I'd say about Konate is I don't massively trust his fitness record either. He is, I don't know, he just feels like he goes on a good run of games for like 3 months and then picks up an injury and he's out for another month or so. That's just the kind of feeling I have about Konate. Although he is probably right now the best of the Liverpool defenders to pick from, I would say, at the price point at least.
Okay, so here's a question to you. For Liverpool's upcoming double, you've got 3 options, assuming you want 3 Liverpool assets. You've got Salah, an attacker, and a defender. So double attack, 1 defence. You've got double defence, 1 attack. And then you've got Arne Slot with the assistant manager chip. I know it's very early, but what are your initial thoughts? You said you've only got the 1 right now. You might wildcard, or you probably like to have 3. What are your early thoughts on which 3 you'd want to own for their double game week?
I think you've obviously got to have Salah. He's a given. And then defence, right now I'd still say Trent, but I think you've got to wait and see how things play out recently. And then I do really like Arne Slot as the assistant manager. I think he's as guaranteed as you can get to score points there. It's just whether you want to go a bit lower to get the bonus for beating bigger teams, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'm still slightly leaning that way, although I'm tempted to use the assistant manager for double 33 or 36. So I'm going back and forth. Let's say someone doesn't want to use the assistant manager. Maybe they've got the triple captain or they just want to keep it. Out of Konate, Alisson, Diaz, Gakpo, Jota, who would be your first choice 3rd asset at the moment?
I'd probably say, it's really hard to say, but I'd probably give it to Van Dijk,
Van Dijk, okay. Just for security of minutes?
Yeah, I think Salah's the only one of those attackers you can safely pick. It's just if one of them, if they get injuries, for example, if one of them feels emerging is the best, then you should probably go for them. But right now I'd have to say Van Dijk, I think, just to be safe.
Yeah, I think Gakpo looks the most nailed. As we said, I think it's like 8 games in a row, 7 in a row in the Prem. Returns have been there, but you just don't know. I'm pretty sure he was getting subbed early before that goal in the Man United game. I don't know. Like, Slot quickly spoke to the fourth official, and then he spoke to the person that was coming on, and then they changed it, and then they put the number up. It might have been they were discussing something else, but it looked very much like Gakpo was about to come off and Diaz was going to stay on, and then Diaz was the one that got the early sub. Their upside is very high, and especially with a double, but I just don't know if it's worth the emotional turmoil for me of trying to, I hate, and it happens, I'm a bit of a nerd with FPL, maybe other people don't do this, but I'm like refreshing the team sheet when the lineups come out when I own someone like this. I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
On Monday night, I completely forgot to check the team sheet because I knew Chris would be in it. That's such a nice feeling to just know that your players are going to be available. And when I look at someone like Gordon or Bruno Fernandes, maybe they don't have the same ceiling, right? Neither of those maybe have the whole potential of a Luis Diaz or a Jota can get a hat-trick in 5 minutes. He's that good. But they also will start every game. So it's not for me. If it was, and I was going to put you on the spot, Diaz, Jota, Gakpo, who would you be going for right now?
It's probably Gakpo, isn't it? Yeah, probably Gakpo.
In terms of minutes, yeah. I think Diaz and Jota might be a better FPL asset, but obviously Jota starts against Spurs. Diaz got an early sub in the Man United game. Ari's minutes starting to come to an end. And also, across the season, even when Jota was injured, Diaz never had good minutes, right? He started the first 5 or 6 of the season. Then he was benched for game weeks 7 and 8. Then 62 in game weeks 9. Then benched, then starts, then benched, then starts, then benched. And then he started 2 in a row. So he's really been on a start, bench. And that's without Diogo Jota fit for a lot of that. So who is to say that even if Jota was to get injured, he still starts every game? I'm sadly probably not going to be going there for another attacker. So for me, it's probably Konate, Van Dijk, Alisson, or Slot. I obviously reserve the right to change my mind if there is an injury, and I think that might be the key thing. Let's say Diaz got injured and Jota was looking fit again. I'd be all over that. Yeah. Or let's say Gakpo gets injured and Diaz shifts back out to the left. I'd be all over that again. But as things stand with everyone fully fit, I'm probably not going to go there. Cool. All right. Forest versus Liverpool. This is a really tricky. I'm going to make you go first. Forest versus Liverpool. How do you see that going?
Yeah, I don't see, unfortunately, I don't see Forest keeping a clean sheet. I think I'm actually going to bench Aina in my team.
Yep.
I'm going to say 2-0 to Liverpool. I don't think Forest will score, unfortunately, as a Wood owner.
I'm starting Wood, so I'm going to say 2-1.
Okay.
But I agree. I think Liverpool might have a little bit too much. Just very briefly, actually, Salah captain. We've both only predicted 2 goals there. Salah could have obviously get both of those goals. Let's say you obviously are in a unique position with Haaland. Let's say you didn't have Haaland, but you had Palmer, Isak, Salah. Is Salah the standout captain for you?
I don't think so. I think it's probably Isak. If I was a guessing man and I didn't have Haaland.
Fixtures there, isn't it, to attack and at home. Oh, I hate not captaining Salah, but it might be the week. Maybe when we move on to our own teams, we'll discuss captaincy a bit more. Next game is Everton versus Aston Villa. I don't think much to say on Everton other than the fact that definitely not. They had that run of 0-0 draws. They got 0-0 draw against Arsenal, 0-0 draw against Chelsea. And the narrative at that time was Sean Dyche is the man. Like 0-0 draws against some of the best teams in the league. Brilliant. In the last 3 game weeks, though, they are the team that have conceded the 4th highest XG. And they've conceded 14 big chances in 3 games, which only Southampton and West Ham can beat. I say they can beat. That's obviously not a good thing. But basically, they're the 3rd worst defence in the league over the last 3. They're looking really rough at the moment. Actually, the latest is that Sean Dyche's position is under threat.
Yeah.
Apparently, Everton are openly looking at other options, which is crazy to say. I think Everton have to make a decision right now. Do you want to stay in the league comfortably? And I really do think that Sean Dyche will keep them comfortably in the league. Because it's Sean Dyche.
Yeah.
But he's not getting any more. Right, they'll finish 15th, 16th, 17th if they keep Sean Dyche. Or do they want to push on, try and have a really good season, and then give the new manager some more time with the team, but risk getting relegated? Because you bring in a manager from abroad that's not done the Premier League before, with, in all honesty, an Everton side with very few good attacking players. Like they still have Beto, Calvert-Lewin, McNeil's injured at the moment. Like it's a rough team. What would you do if you were Everton? It's such a difficult position for them to be in, I think.
Yeah, I can't claim too much closeness to Everton, but I kind of feel sorry for Sean Dyche because you kind of know what style of football he's going to play for your football club. I think he's almost a match made in heaven for that current Everton squad.
Yeah,
and like you say, they just don't have the attackers to keep them scoring goals. So they're going to have to rely on keeping clean sheets to even be competitive. I think. I feel sorry for him, to be honest, and. Yeah, you bring someone in now, who do you bring in? And you have to bring in a new manager with new players, I think, to get any level of success out of Everton.
I mean, Graham Potter would have been perfect, but he's obviously not available now, and I don't blame him for taking the West Ham job instead. So when I initially looked at this game week, because I plan ahead quite a lot, I looked at Rodgers and was like, definitely bench Rodgers. Everton away, horrible fixture. It's now not a horrible fixture. So that was the key thing I wanted to bring up here, is that he's come back from his suspension, got a rest, which is really nice. They play against West Ham, actually. Is it? Yeah, I think it's on tomorrow evening. So on the day of this coming out, it's in the evening. They play against West Ham in the FA Cup. Because that's not an easy third round game like some other people had, we might see Rodgers get some minutes. So let's obviously wait and see how he plays, make sure he doesn't get injured. But Rodgers being back, I'd be very happy starting him. We spoke about Wood versus Rodgers. I would probably start Rodgers ahead of Wood, I think.
That's a fair shout, yeah.
Which I know we said we backed the penalty taker and stuff like that, but I just think it looks like a really good fixture for him. The only slight caveat to that is Rodgers is really good in games where he's got space. We saw that against Manchester City. Games where he's allowed to counter and have a lot of the ball and run with the ball against tired defence. Everton won't ever put themselves in the position under Sean Dyche to allow him to run. I suppose if Sean Dyche is hearing in his ear, if you don't start scoring goals, you're gone, which is probably what he's being told. Maybe we do see a little bit more of a all-out Sean Dyche performance, which I don't know if he knows how to do that. But yeah, maybe. I just think Rodgers looks really good for this week. I'm very happy to have him. And then after Arsenal, Villa play West Ham, Wolves, Ipswich, which are just three great fixtures. So you just keep Rodgers.
Absolutely. I think, go back to those midfielders of that price category, I think he's the absolute number one.
Can I ask you, I'll put you on the spot then. Can you rank the top 3 midfielders below 6 million for you in order? 1, 2, 3.
I'd probably, Rodgers number 1. I'd have Ahmad number 2. And really close on that third one. You've got Enzo. For me, I'd put Semenyo in that category. Sarr. Have I forgotten anyone?
Murphy.
Yeah, Murphy's up there as well. In fact, right now, he's probably third, actually, Murphy.
I would agree with all of that, but I'm going to be a pessimistic Man United fan. I'd put Sarr in there ahead of Ahmad. I think I would have Rodgers, Murphy, Sarr. But I think we're roughly along the lines. Basically, Rodgers is definitely probably first or second best cheap midfielder. And I'm very glad that I decided to hold on to him. If you bought Ollie Watkins previously, Duran's now back. He serves his final of the 3-game suspension in the the FA Cup. So he's back for this game. Does Duran go back in, do you think? Or do you reckon Watkins has done enough to keep his spot for now?
I tell you what, that's a tough decision for Emery as to who to start there. I honestly have no idea. I think Watkins probably keeps his place, but he'll get subbed early and Duran will come on if that happens, I think.
I think it's a huge hit to the ego for Ollie Watkins if the only reason he comes back in is because of a suspension and then Duran comes straight back in the game that he's back. I think he's done enough, Ollie Watkins, but as you say, no chance he gets 90. And then after that, if Duran comes off the bench and scores again, or if he looks good in the FA Cup, then I think his time's limited. So I think I'd keep Watkins one more game, and then I'd move him on after that to someone like Chris Wood.
Yeah, fair enough.
Especially for that Southampton fixture. Cool. I don't think there's much more to discuss in Everton Villa. So what do you predict that score being? This could be anything.
Yeah, I'll go 2-0 to Villa.
Okay, I was going to say exactly the same. So we'll both go for the same score there, 2-0 to Villa. I could see it being a lot of goals if, again, Sean Dyche is told, this is your last game. If you don't score, then we're bidding you off. Then he can't set up in the same fashion. Cool. Right, Leicester versus Palace. Same as before, not much to say on Leicester other than I think they've been a little bit better under Ruud. In the last couple of games. The first few under Ruud van Nistelrooy, because I love Ruud van Nistelrooy, Man United fan, legend of the club, did really well for us when he stepped in. I hated what I saw because they looked awful under him for the first few games. But in the last 2, there are 6 teams with greater XGC. So they are not the worst defence in the league, not even that close. And 12 teams have conceded more big chances.
Right, okay.
And the last 2 games were City and Villa.
Yeah.
So I know City aren't fully functional right now and the Villa were without Rodgers. But all of that to say, they're actually looking okay at the moment. They're not the worst team in the league, at least over the last 2. I don't think this is as good of a fixture for Palace as it originally looked, but you'd still expect Palace to do fairly well in this. Out of the Palace assets, Eze, Sarr, Mateta, Munoz, who stands out? Do you have any Palace at the moment?
I don't know.
No Palace, okay.
No Palace. Any
chance of bringing any of them in? And if so, who stands out to you?
So, yeah, I was potentially considering bringing in Munoz for Colwill, because if you're a Munoz owner right now, I think you can consider yourself really unlucky that he's not come away with a goal or something, because he's come so close. I'd probably actually... I might put him as number 1, just considering his price and how attacking he is for a defender. And then the old Sarvi-Eze debate is quite a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, so where would you go right now on Eze, Sarr, or at least talk us through your thought process on why it's close?
I think I'd personally prefer Eze, just because he's got a longer proven track record of doing all right for Palace, whereas Sarr, you might argue it's a bit of a purple patch. But there's definitely justification to get Sarr. Like, his underlying numbers are probably better. And Eze's injury record's not been great this season or last season either. I think you get what you pay for with both of them, really, to be honest.
Yeah, I think if they were the same price, Eze, every day of the week, I think, because historically the data is very strong. As you say, consistent across multiple seasons. He does take the odd set piece. He still has a share of penalties.
Yeah.
If he won a penalty, wouldn't be surprised to see him take it. And he is probably the most likely one to win a penalty. But we think Mateta's still slightly ahead. So you've got a little bit of a share of set pieces, a little bit of a share of penalties. Minutes-wise, I think now as he's fully fit, they'll be relatively similar, although Sarr's have been slightly better. The data is definitely in favour of Sarr right now. He's got slightly greater goal threat, but Eze's the one getting the returns. And I would say Eze has quality that Sarr probably doesn't.
Yeah.
So I think overall, I would probably say Eze is a better asset, but considering the price difference, I'd still just lean Sarr. Because even if it feels like you don't need the money now, I can guarantee you will need it very, very soon. So I think they're both absolutely fine. What about Mateta? I'm a Mateta fanboy, but do you think he's a decent asset? I won't be offended if you say no.
Absolutely. No, I'm going to say, yeah. He completely saved my season last year. I bought him in when he was a bit of a differential, and I can solely thank Mateta for finishing in the top 100k last season, purely down to him. So he's a legend in my eyes.
Did you own him for Gameweek 34 for that 29 points?
I did.
That goes down 29 points.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
But would I pick him now? That's a big one. I guess the penalties sharing would put me off, I guess, a little bit. It's just a thought of whether you go down to Chris Wood or up to Isak. He's kind of, I guess it depends how much cash you have.
He's a tricky price point. That's actually why I bought Mateta, because I thought he's at a price point that will put everyone off. And I thought everyone will go down to João Pedro or Wood, or everyone will just try and get to Isak, and everyone will go, ooh, Mateta's in that. I don't want him. And I like owning a lowly owned forward. He did very well last week, obviously getting the 8-pointer against Chelsea. It's just those fixtures was the main thing. Leicester, West Ham, Brentford, United, Everton, Fulham. It's a great run of fixtures there, especially the next 3 or 4. I suppose the concern now, though, with Palace is that they're looking very likely to blank in 29. If Newcastle do make the final, again, Palace will be a team that do not play in Game Week 29. So you're bringing in, if you've already got Munoz and you're already looking at one of Sarr, and maybe you've got Murphy, you've got Isak, etc., well, you're looking at another player that might not play. And as much as that feels very far in the distance and you might free hit, you also might not free hit. And you might therefore need to use transfers to remove him. I still think he's top 3 to 5 replacements. If you're looking to replace a forward right now, I'd still put him up there. But I would have Isak ahead. I'd obviously have Wood ahead. And I might even say just save the money and go down if he's fit to like a João Pedro or Raul Jimenez. But I am extremely happy sat there with Mateta. Yeah. I think he's one of those that you're happy because you know no one's going to go there. Like, you know no one's buying Haaland this week. So you're sat there thinking, you know, his ownership's probably going to stay quite low. I'd imagine that Mateta's probably not going to be bought by many other managers. But I think he's okay. The one thing I will say, his underlying data is really rubbish/average. So it's not a very me pick, because I would say actually Chris Wood and Mateta, the 2 forwards that I bought recently, they've got 2 of the worst underlying datas in the Premier League out of all forwards. Like, they've both got really rubbish data. Yeah. But I'm trying to incorporate a little bit more eye test and also like talisman theory and just thinking they are the number 9 for a decent team. So yeah, I think he's fine. And I think the only other probably Crystal Palace player to mention is actually Mitchell. Really going under the radar because everyone's all on Munoz. And I'm not going to sit here and say you should go Mitchell over Munoz, but he's now up to 6th out of all defenders for expected assist. To put into perspective how creative he is, he's got higher expected assists than Robinson and Porro. Robinson missed a 7 assists. Yeah. Porro's obviously got a few assists this season. So I actually think Mitchell is going under the radar, but he's the same price as Munoz. Yeah. So you're not going to go out there and buy him instead. But let's say your mini league rivals got Munoz, or let's say you just don't like bringing in assets that everyone already owns, and he is getting more owned Munoz. I don't mind Mitchell. So if I was to say, would you prioritize a Palace attacker or Munoz this week? If someone's like got no Palace assets, maybe let's say that someone's got a defender they don't mind removing and Semenyo, and they're like, I want to know, do I prioritize Sarr, Eze, Munoz? Where would you lean right now?
Okay, definitely Munoz in that case, because that's the position I'm in, and I'd rather buy Munoz for sure. He's
basically an attacker anyway. Yeah. I was saying, would you prefer the attackers or Munoz? But really, Munoz is an attacker. And also, by the way, Munoz in Game Week 20 had 0.33 expected assists and created a big chance. He actually had 0 XG to never shot, which is the first game this season he's had higher XA than XG.
Right, okay.
So he's even got some creativity in that. He's just brilliant, Munoz. I would say Munoz, top 2 cheap defenders to bring in, along with Lewis Hall, who we'll discuss
for sure.
in the next one. Okay, Palace Leicester. Which way? I'll go first on this one. I'm going to say 2-1 Palace. I think Leicester have improved. I think they'll score, and I think they'll limit Palace more than we expect, but I still think Palace have too much.
Yeah, gut feel that feels about right. I'll go different, just not to, so I don't copy it. I'll say 3-1 to Palace in that case.
Okay, Mateta getting a hat-trick. I love it. Cool. So moving on to the Newcastle Wolves game. The player that I really want to discuss is actually Murphy, who I don't think I've given enough airtime to in recent weeks. 5.2 million, I believe. Now, let me just double check his price. So prepared for this pod. Yeah, 5.1 million. Okay, so he's cheaper than Rodgers. About the same sort of price as Enzo. Cheaper than Sarr. Why are we not giving Murphy more consideration, and should we?
It's a very fair point. I think quite a few people, did they have him at the start of the season?
Yeah, he was touted as a decent cheap option to start the season, and then obviously I don't think his minutes were that great. Yeah. So I mean, he was benched he started in the first 2 games, but limited minutes, then bench, then start, then bench. So he's in and out of the team a little bit. Yeah, but would you consider him ahead of some of the other options right now?
Definitely. Like I said, I think he's probably for me 3rd place, and it's close between him and Ahmad. I'd always have Rodgers as the king, but then it's definitely Murphy and Ahmad just below him, I reckon. And the form Newcastle in at the moment, you have to consider him.
I think the only reason you wouldn't is the minutes, right? But he started 7 games in a row in the Premier League, and his minutes in the last 3 have been 77, 84, 85. Prior to that, they were a lot of pre-70 subs. So minutes are getting better. Fitness is getting better. And I would say his role within the team is becoming a little bit more dominant. He felt like a bit part at points where he was like, Gordon and Isak do everything. Yeah. And then Murphy just support if you can. I think he's got something like 6 returns in the last 4. He's bossing it really at the moment. I struggle to think what else I would want. Good fixtures. Minutes are good. Starts seem pretty secure. Very cheap. Playing in a good attack. I think the returns are sustainable to some extent. Yeah. If you, again, watch the Arsenal game, an assist and a pre-assist. I do think he's more, because of where he plays on the right and because of his role, I think he is more favoured towards creativity than goal threat, which might be the only concern. But we're happy to own the likes of Enzo, who again is more favoured towards creativity. The more I think about it, I think Murphy might be the standout cheap midfielder to go to right now.
Yeah.
I think if you're looking to move them a lot around, I think if you're looking to hold this player for 10 weeks, because Newcastle might blank in 29, and because his minutes aren't as secure as someone like Rodgers, then no. But if you're looking to own someone for the next 4, I think Murphy will outscore all of the other cheap midfielders over the next 4, probably. You would expect.
Yeah, that's a fair point, yeah.
So I think it depends on what you're looking for from a midfielder, but I like him. Anthony Gordon, then, we briefly mentioned him at the start. I really want him. And he's the player that I can't really get to right now. Do you have an easy route to him?
No, I've got literally nothing in the bank with my team. So I've got to stick with my structure of 2 cheapy mids, but I'm missing out, definitely.
There are a lot of questions around Murphy versus Gordon. And we're going to do Ahmad versus Bruno in a second. It's worth the savings, Murphy. Is it a decent alternative, or do you just think Gordon's such a better asset?
I think Gordon's a bit of a teacher's pet with Eddie Howe, isn't he? And he's played, even when he's left the stadium. I remember him I think it was last season, leaving the stadium on crutches and then playing the game week after. I just think his minutes are so secure. In that
almost broke his nose in game week 20.
Yeah, he's carried on.
He had a busted nose, carried on, and then also played against Arsenal for 75 minutes. I agree. He runs him into the ground, which isn't great for his injuries, but I think you are paying for extra security of minutes. You're paying for greater goal threat, which he absolutely has. You're paying for a player that is currently on set pieces that Murphy isn't. I think the money is justified. But if you can't afford Gordon and you want a piece of the Newcastle attack, because Isak right now is owned by everyone, you're not gaining anything. I have absolutely no issue going for Jacob Murphy. So yeah, I think he's a really good shout. The only other Newcastle player, I suppose, is Lewis Hall. So you said you think Munoz is the standout. Do you think there's any justification to buy Hall instead of Munoz this week?
Ooh, if I did say, I would regret saying that because I actually think Hall's better.
I might have put words in your mouth there. Fine. That's fine. So yeah, you think you'd go Hall over Munoz right now?
Yeah, attacking wise, I think Munoz just has the edge, but defensively, I think Newcastle are on another level. And I would always think is with Newcastle, I just think there's something about them playing at St James's Park. Yeah. When they're at home, they can beat and keep a clean sheet against anyone. And I think he's got quite a few home games coming up, if I'm not mistaken.
3 of the next 4 are at home. Yeah, Wolves at home, Bournemouth at home. The away game's Southampton, and then it's Fulham at home.
That feels like they could keep 4 clean sheets there, I think.
And these just come off the back of 4 clean sheets in the Prem as well. I'm glad you've said that, because I think in isolation, I think Munoz might be a marginally better asset. But when you look at, if you told me Palace or Newcastle lose 3 of their next 4 games, I'd say it's Palace. If you're expecting one of the teams to stink it up, you expect... I don't expect Newcastle to go on a really bad run right now. So if I'm backing the better team and the team that I trust more, as you say, I think it is Newcastle. And what I like about Hall, better for baseline bonus and on set pieces. So whilst I think Munoz has the greater goal threat, Hall has the greater assist threat and more routes to points through bonus and through the set pieces. So I would have my top 2 defenders as Hall and Munoz.
Definitely, yeah, without question.
I'm glad we agree on that. And then I would probably have my third as probably Forest or Castagna. Yeah? Cool. Right, we agree on that then. On Wolves, I do think they are looking better under Vitor Pereira. Obviously, Forest showed them the levels on Monday night, but Forest, I think, are a very good team. And also, they had their chances in that game, Wolves, and they didn't concede that many of their own either. So I don't think it was an awful performance. The big news is that obviously Cunha will return from suspension and probably batter all of our ranks. Do you keep Cunha now for the difficult fixtures, or do you still think you move him on?
I think you probably do, just with how good he's been. Oh, by the way, that suspension only being 2 games is madness, by the way.
It's outrageous, wasn't it? Apparently, did you hear why it was only 2 games?
Did he apologise?
Apparently, he wrote a letter to the member of staff apologising and offering to buy him some new glasses.
Okay.
And apparently that was the reason that they reduced the ban. So all you have to do, you can punch someone in the face and just say, really sorry, should I buy you a new face? I think it's ridiculous. It should have been 5.
Yeah. Quite. And my team, Bristol City, have got them in the FA Cup this weekend. So he obviously misses one of the Premier League games of the ban. So he's only 1 Premier League game he misses. So, yeah, I'd keep him there if I had him.
I think you keep him for 1 because I think the best player to sell him for is Chris Wood, who doesn't have a very good fixture this week. But then next week it's Southampton. So if you keep him and actually doesn't look that great, or you just think, I want Chris Wood, then you can make the move next week, I think. And Ait-Nouri is standing out to me right now, just eye test wise. He's all over the attack. He's taking set pieces, which he might take a few less of when Cunha's back. But even when Cunha was in the team under Vitor Pereira, Ait-Nouri's taking set pieces. When Wolves' fixtures improve, which is around sort of 28, 29, 30, I'm looking back to Ait-Nouri. I want the pain. I love him as an asset. And I just think in this role under Vitor Pereira, he's going to be very, very attacking.
What does the flip side look like between him and Munoz? Like when Ait-Nouri's fixtures get better, do Munoz's kind of turn off? Because I think they're almost the same sort of asset, with Crystal Palace probably being the better defence right now.
Yeah, so the thing is with Palace, we probably should have said this, is like the fixtures are good up until 30. If you can get, let's say you're free hitting in 29, because either side of Gameweek 29, it's Ipswich at home and Southampton away. So if you are free hitting in 29, Palace assets are probably perfect. You load up, get all the good fixtures, but then you don't have to own them in 29. Yeah, let's look at Wolves' fixtures, because they basically had them in 4 blocks. They had that really difficult block, an easy block, a difficult block, and then an easy block. It's almost perfect. So their fixtures improve from 28 onwards. They've got Everton, Southampton, West Ham, Ipswich. So yeah, maybe around 28, 29.
Ait-Nouri later.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you can own the players that never keep clean sheets.
Yes.
And also never get attacking returns for you when you own them. Cool. Newcastle Wolves, how are we predicting this one going?
Oh, 4-1 to Newcastle.
Wow, okay. Yeah. I'm going to say 3-1. I was going to say 2-1, but I just can't see Wolves keeping them to 2 goals. So I'll go 3-1. I do think that Wolves are slowly getting there under Vitor Pereira, so I'll give them a little bit there. Cool. Arsenal, Spurs. Obviously, 2 teams that have just played their EFL Cup semi-finals. Yep. Spurs obviously getting a ridiculously good result. Arsenal, the opposite. Arsenal are faltering a little bit. They're struggling right now, right? Ødegaard's not at it. Saka is a huge miss. They're getting injuries left, right, and centre. Nwaneri's now out for a few weeks with a muscular injury. What do you do if you own Ødegaard and Martinelli ahead of this Spurs game? On paper, Spurs at home looks good, but they're not free-flowing at all in the attack.
Yeah, I'd still have Spurs as a team I'd target, I think, in terms of attacking assets. I'd probably keep them, but there's also the derby factor, right, as well. So it's going to be a needly game.
Yeah.
I'd probably keep them, but they'd definitely be on my list to get rid of for sure afterwards.
The good thing for Ødegaard is he wasn't taking any in-swing and set pieces because Nwaneri was taking them all. But with him injured, Ødegaard should now be on corners and free kicks. I don't think this makes them better, though, because Nwaneri was playing very well. But it should mean that Ødegaard has extra routes to points, which is, of course, very, very nice.
He's on penalties, right, Ødegaard?
He should be, yeah, would expect that. I mean, Havertz has taken them in the past, so you might see him take one, but I would be very shocked if it wasn't Ødegaard, especially as the captain. Obviously, Jesus was benched in the EFL Cup semi-final. You can look at this as a rest. You can look at this as rotation. You can look at this as him being dropped. It's how you want to frame it. But that was pretty much their first choice 11, and Jesus wasn't in there. It is good, though, that he had his rest, I suppose, and that he's not getting absolutely flogged into the ground. So I probably expect him to start against Spurs. But he's another... I wouldn't be looking to buy any Arsenal assets right now, I don't think.
I agree. I was actually going to ask, if you had, say, an Arsenal defender and it was a little bit of a tough decision on if you've got someone on the bench, for example, would you actually start your Arsenal defenders against Spurs? Like if you had Gabriel versus Robinson, for example.
I wouldn't start Saliba.
Yeah.
But I would start Timber and Gabriel. Because I think they're monsters from set pieces. Yeah. We actually saw in the Brighton game, by the way, Brighton left 3 attackers. I don't know if you saw this, but Brighton left 3 attackers in the halfway line. Saliba stayed back.
Okay.
So he wasn't actually getting into the box for set pieces. Wow. He was the one that was like, do you know what? Let's not get caught on the counter. And because he's not very good in the air. And I think we've seen enough of that from an attacking perspective to be much of a set piece. The only 2 goals that he got, one fell to him from like a yard out when Gabriel was injured, and the other one was relatively easy chance as well. So, yeah, I wouldn't mind benching, because I think Spurs score here, but Gabriel's such a set-piece monster. Yeah. I benched Gabriel 3 times this season. I'll remind you which games.
Oh, no.
It was against Spurs in Game Week 4, and he got 15 points.
Yep.
It was against City in Gameweek 5 and he got 7, and it was against Aston Villa in Gameweek 2 and he got 6.
Oh, right.
So I benched him for 6, 15, 7.
You'll never bench him again,
I'm never benching Gabriel again. But I do think he's just so good in the air that I wouldn't. And Spurs, Kinski, by the way, looked really good in the EFL Cup semi, but I still think that they're susceptible to conceding from set pieces. On Spurs, doesn't sound like they're getting any of their defenders back anytime soon, so that might further re-emphasize the fact that we keep Jesus, Ødegaard, Martinelli for at least one more. But I do think Kinski will make them a little bit more solid, a little bit less prone to mistakes, you'd imagine, based on that first game. And I just think it instills a bit more confidence in Archie Gray and Dragerson, because they're clearly not a first choice centre-back pairing. So I just think it makes them feel a little bit more confident. I want your opinion on Solanke. We sort of spoke about him briefly at the start. We said that he's consistent. Obviously, you're not going to bring him in for Arsenal, but is he a player that we should start to look to? Because after Arsenal, his 5 games are Everton, Leicester, Brentford, United, Ipswich.
Yeah, I remember because I had him from the start of the season. He got injured for a couple of game weeks, and I just kept patience with him and left him in my team because I knew he's just, last season at Bournemouth, I think he scored 19 goals. So he proved he's like a guaranteed Premier League goal scorer. But then his positions weren't great. And I don't know, I think his positions weren't great against weaker opposition. And when you talk about having good fixtures coming up, that could lead to him maybe playing a bit deeper. But again, I said it at the start, I think he's just a steady Eddie you can trust to consistently knock in goals.
Yeah, I think recently he's looked a little bit closer to goal. So I'm very eager, as you say, to see. I probably won't have a chance to bring him in for the next few. Does he start to drop a bit? Does he do more of that link-up play? Or does he continue as the 9? It might have just been that Anja said to him, mate, we need you a little bit closer to goal. It might have been a little tweak and just said, play more as a 9, in which case I think he'll be great. And especially if he can start to pick up bonus points, which we saw for only the second time in Gameweek 20. I don't have an issue with that. I think if you own Solanke now and you've kept him this whole time, probably bench him against Arsenal. And then I'd look to start him beyond that.
Yeah.
Everton, Leicester, Brentford, United, Ipswich. It's 5 really weak defenses generally there. So yeah, I like it a lot. Okay, difficult one again. Arsenal versus Spurs. Predictions?
2-2. That's my gut feel for that.
Okay, I'm going to go 0-0.
Okay.
And that's because I don't own anyone other than Gabriel from this game. But also, I could just see Arsenal thinking, do you know what, we're not doing too good at the moment. Sometimes Arteta is a very... not say like reserved manager sometimes. I feel like if he knows that Arsenal aren't in a good place, he'll just say shore up defensively and then try and catch them. But I just don't know that Arsenal attack has enough quality right now.
I can see the Stoke City memes from here, from that
game. Absolutely. So I'm going to go 0-0. Maybe 1-0 with a Gabriel header would be very nice. Cool. Next game, Ipswich, Brighton. On Ipswich, not much to discuss other than Delap. Such a good player.
Yeah, I actually watched that game with my dad at the weekend. He got all the plaudits in the lead up from the pundits as well, saying how good he was. Yeah.
Where's he going to end up next season? Because it's not Ipswich. I'd love to see him at United, but he surely wouldn't want to join us. But he's a 9, you know. And we're seeing a bit of a return of the 9. Solanke's a proper 9 as well. There's a couple of others in the Premier League that just a real, even like Raul Jimenez, proper number 9. You know, just like bullies on the ball, got a little bit about them, but they're good in the air, quite physical. There's not a lot of Delaps in the world at the moment. My concern from an FPL perspective is that outside of the 2 penalties, he's had 0 big chances in 5 games.
Yeah.
So he's not really he's playing well, but in this Ipswich team, they're not set up to score lots of goals. So I absolutely wouldn't be considering Delap as an option, especially with their fixtures. But the team to discuss is Brighton. So I was going to have a really in-depth chat about João Pedro, and we will still do that. But the latest news as of today is that he's twisted his ankle in training and that he's getting an MRI scan. You'll probably know this at the time of you watching on the Friday, what the results of the scan are, but it looks very unlikely that he'll play in the Norwich game. It is also the ankle injury that he's done twice. I don't know if it's the same ankle, but he's already in the last season had 2 ankle injuries. You'd imagine it's the same ankle. Being sent for a scan is never normally a good sign.
Never a good thing, no.
However, they do normally scan them just in case. So even if it is fine, you'd still sometimes be sent for a scan, but to be sent for an MRI scan the day of the injury, I wouldn't be surprised if it is an issue. The good thing for owners, and also the bad thing, their game against Ipswich isn't until Thursday. So it's 7 days from the day of his injury. The issue is, therefore, Hertzler's press conference won't take place until Wednesday, probably. So we're probably not going to get a Hertzler press conference until after the deadline. What do you think? You have to keep him, I suppose, just in case, unless we get news that he's injured long term.
Yeah, and I'd imagine most managers have someone on their bench that they wouldn't be too upset about coming in for him if they needed to.
I think a lot of people replied to my tweet today, said it solves a benching headache, which is kind of the general perspective that a lot of people have. Let's wait and see. I will just note, I don't think he's been very good outside of the 2 penalties. So, sorry, the penalty and the 2 assists. So, outside of the penalty, in the past 6 game weeks, João Pedro has had 1 big chance and only 2 shots on target in 6 game weeks. And remember last time I said this, it was before Solanke's 16-pointer and before Mbeumo's monster hauls. So maybe don't pay too much attention. But his XGI, non-penalty per 90 of 0.11 over the past 6 game weeks places him 83rd in the Premier League. The following players have more goal threat than João Pedro over the last 6 game weeks. Lacroix, Rice, Norgard, Ayari, Harrison, Chalobah, Curtis Jones. There are obviously 75 more players, but yeah, basically, he's been really awful from an FPL perspective outside of a penalty, because he didn't have a shot in that game, an assist which brushed his leg and he didn't even know it was there, and then a sideways pass to Lamptey. I'm very salty because I sold him before 2 9-pointers, but he's not been very good.
And that Arsenal penalty was so soft, in my opinion. So yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Basically, I think if he's a real doubt and you were looking to move him on anyway, to someone like a Chris Wood, maybe this is all you need to make the move. But given the fixtures aren't that bad and given that he is on penalties and getting 90 minutes, I do think you can probably hold on to him. Let's wait and see if we get any news before the deadline. The good news, if he is fit, is that Welbeck is apparently soon to return, and he was much better. Yeah. In fact, the last 6 have been without Welbeck, and I think he just plays off Welbeck so well. Last week, Hertzler said that he was without pain and back on the grass, so could see a return in the coming game.
That feels about right next week coming back from that, yeah.
So I think overall, basically, João Pedro is a fine keep or a fine sell, I think. And I don't think selling him is a massive issue. Even if he was fit, I think Ipswich could be a difficult game. The only other Brighton player to discuss is actually Matoma. I didn't realise until I was looking over their games. He's been benched in the last 2 game weeks.
Yeah.
Which is...
You can't have him if he's been benched 2 in a row, can you?
No, but he started 17 of the 18 prior to that. The only one he was benched for was post-international break when Japan had to travel so far. So he's basically been their most nailed asset and then he's benched twice in a row. I haven't seen anything to suggest there's a reason for that. But yeah, you sell him.
Yeah.
I think, although Ipswich, selling before Ipswich away, I do think the Ipswich are a little bit better than people give them credit for. So I will say he's probably a sell to someone like Sarr, Ahmad, Murphy, Rodgers, someone like that probably. Cool. Ipswich, Brighton.
1-1.
Okay, I'm going to go 1-0, bro. No, I want to give Ipswich a goal. I'm going to go 2-1 Brighton.
Okay.
I think Brighton have too much, but yeah, I'd like to give Ipswich a goal. Maybe Delap will get a goal from open play in this one.
Is Lewis Dunk out at the moment for Brighton?
Lewis Dunk is also out, yeah, so maybe that does give them the... Although I think Igor's out as well, isn't he, though? They've got real issues with their defence at the moment, but apparently, Igor's out, Dunk's out. Oh, wow. Do you know what? I'll give him a goal. Do you want to change your prediction?
No, I'll stick with 1-1. I think Brighton will do enough to get a result, but yeah, I'll go 1-0.
Okay, perfect. Cool. Final game is Man United versus Southampton. A question that I've got from a lot of people: is Ahmad worth the 3 million saving over Bruno?
I think you probably have to say yes, but I do really like Bruno Fernandes. When I spoke about him, Boomo, he just ticks all the boxes of what you want in an FPL player. He plays every game, even he barely ever gets injured, takes penalties, free kicks, creates lots of chances, albeit probably don't get finished all the time. But he ticks all the boxes. But then Ahmad, in the form that he's in at the moment, he's certainly going to play that game, in my opinion. So with that in mind, he is probably worth the difference. But with respect to, obviously, Bruno Fernandes.
I think so. The way that I tried, because I was thinking about this, is he worth the extra 3 million? My immediate answer was no, but I would still prefer Bruno. So I was like, why would I prefer Bruno? So I think the best way to explain it is Ahmad is better value for money. So if you're looking at points per million, I think Ahmad will get you more. But in a lot of teams, you don't need that extra money right now. So if I look at my team, I've got Trent, Isak, Palmer, Salah, Mateta, Gabriel, a decent keeper, and I've got 1.5 in the bank. What is going from Bruno to Ahmad getting me? Not a lot. I'd probably still be sat there with money in the bank. So I think if you're in a position where you're happy with your team and the money saved isn't going to be directly useful right now, I would still expect Bruno to score more points than Amad Diallo. I think he's a better asset. But if you don't own Isak or you don't own Trent and you want to go there, or you want to bring in, I don't know, let's say you've not had Palmer or Salah and you want to go there, if that 3 million is going to get you a lot, or let's say to go from like Dibbling to Gordon or something like that, then I kind of do get it. But I do think Bruno's a better asset. So hopefully that makes sense as to why I think Bruno is not worth the extra 3, but he still is in some situations. Are there any other assets to consider for Man United?
I think so. It's a bit of a pun that I made.
Okay, because I put no other assets. I'm interested to see where you're going with this one.
I said at the start of the season, I think Onana will be the top scoring goalkeeper come the end of the season. And
it's looking possible.
I still hold that.
So whereabouts is he in terms of the goalkeepers? Is he top 5 or?
Imagine he's fallen off. He was top at one point. I imagine he's fallen off a little bit.
He's still 4th, only 6 points behind Raya. He just makes so many saves. That's why.
It's the perfect combo of they'll keep like an average amount of clean sheets and they give up so many chances. He'll get a saves bonus.
Yeah, Sells is on 94 points, Pickford 87, Raya 78, Onana 72. Can I just ask then, if you were to buy a goalkeeper right now, Sells?
Yeah, I think Sales is the one right now, definitely. And he's probably going up and up in price. He might even go up again, to be honest, after this comes out, but I'd still put him at number one.
Cool. And then finally, just Southampton, the final team to discuss. There's no consideration to own their players. I mean, you've got Dibbling, but you're not gonna,
he's the only one, right?
And you're probably not going to play him too often. I just want to say they did, ship 11 big chances to Brentford, and they looked appalling. Yeah. It's sad because they were starting to look a little bit better in the first couple of games under new management, but they've just gone back to just being awful again. So I'm pretty happy to sit here and say they're the worst team in the league.
I would agree.
And so Man United will probably lose.
Yeah, exactly.
What is your prediction on the Man United Southampton game?
Given what I said on Onana, I'll probably go 2-0 to United, but I wouldn't. It'd be a classic Man United to see them do badly against Saints, but I'll go 2-0.
I think Old Trafford, the way Southampton defended, I'm going to go 3-1.
Okay.
I just think we'd find a way to concede, but I just think we'll have enough, hopefully. Although it would be the sort of thing we'd do, drawing against Liverpool and then losing to Southampton. Cool. Right, for the next section, I've got some quick fire questions for you. So I'm going to turn the laptop away. There are 6 questions in total. A lot of them we've covered already. For each of them, you can give a bit of justification if you want to, or you can just sort of go one word if you prefer. Okay? Cool. Best captain for Gameweek 21.
So I know I've got Haaland, but I would honestly say probably Isak. If I was to give someone advice, I'd say Captain Isak this week.
Perfect. Ahmad, Rodgers, Murphy, or Sarr to buy this week?
Rodgers. I put him number one of that cheap mid-price category. So got to go Rodgers.
Cool. Who are the best 3 forwards to own in FPL right now?
I'd probably have to say my 3 with Haaland, Wood, and Isak. Obviously, if you can't get to Haaland, there are other options, but I think that's the best 3 right now.
Okay, let's say you can't afford Haaland. So Isak, Wood, who would be the third?
It would be, I think, Solanke or Mateta.
Okay, I like that. Lewis Hall or Daniel Munoz to buy this week?
Yeah, we say Lewis Hall, I think. Munoz, he's great from an attacking perspective, but I don't think he's quite there defensively as Lewis Hall is.
Who is the best goalkeeper to buy in FPL?
Sales. I'd have to say Sales, yeah.
And then finally, Fernandes or Gordon to buy this week?
That's really tough. Flip a coin. That's what I'd say. Grab a coin and flip a coin. I have no idea between the two of them. To be honest, yeah. Gordon, if I would say one then. Go on.
Perfect. I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think we back Gordon. He's playing in a better team.
Though, to help me, I think.
Right, cool. So guys, as you all know by now, FPL Therapy continues to be sponsored by the wonderful free-to-play fantasy football mobile game Club. If you don't know what Club is, it's basically, as I said, free-to-play fantasy football, where you essentially own a club and try and improve your club overall by meeting with your scout and improving your stadium, etc. And as you can see, this is my club right now. It's looking a bit bare because I basically got loads of good players and then went over my salary cap. So it's not just as easy as you just own all of the good players. You got to really think about it. The defense is looking absolutely beautiful at the moment. Henderson, Robinson, I've got Aina on the bench, Saliba, Gabriel, looking fine. The forward line of Sarr, Isak, Jackson, beautiful. As I say every week, my midfield is terrible. And you might look at that and go, that's a pretty decent midfield. Only Iwobi and Gibbs-White are actually owned by me. The other 3 players are all loaned in. So every week I say to my guest, I need a midfielder. You're going to meet with the agent now, Manny, and I basically need you to pull me a midfielder. So I'll give you the phone right now. You can click meet now. I won't see it. And then let me know. First, is it a midfielder? And then maybe give me a rating. Is it bad? That was a sigh.
No. It's not the position you want, unfortunately.
But is it a good player?
You will not be upset with the player.
Okay, what rating?
90.
90?
Yeah.
You're joking.
I must say, I've never had any luck with like pack openings.
No, you're not. 90?
90.
I've only put, so that's a purple player then?
Yeah.
I've only pulled purple once, which was Saliba 86. You're shitting me, aren't you?
No.
I just one of my own podcasts. I didn't care. 90.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it Salah?
It is, yeah.
Oh, but right. If this is your first episode watching, you will have no idea what his salary is 10 million, right? I don't even care about being over the salary cap. I cannot believe. I can't begin to tell you how rare that is. Like,
neither can I, mate. My luck with these kinds of things is terrible.
Over the last week, I've pulled 1 player over 80 rated, and I use it every 4 hours. I meet with the agent on the dot and sign. I need to be really careful with pressing the sign button, not reject. Continue. Oh, mate, you've made my year there. If my FPL team's not very good. Then? Well, he's going to go in for Jackson. I wish he could play 4 forwards. Oh, beautiful. And Salah is a forwarding club like he should probably be in FPL. Right, guys, if you want to check out Club, it's going to be live in the UK extremely, extremely soon. And you can join the waitlist right now by clicking the link in the description. Thank you very much for your good luck. By the way, it's available in some countries right now. So click the link, check it out. If you want to build your club, I'm actually like shaking. If you want to get someone like as good as Salah, then check it out. Yeah. Thank you very much to Club and check out the link in the description. So the next game is the prediction game for FPL Therapy. And we had a pretty cracking attempt by Leon in Gameweek 20. Yeah, Gameweek 20 last week, wasn't it? So he guessed Foden, Wissa, and Gakpo as these 3 players 10% or below that would perform well in Gameweek 20. They managed 25 points. So Foden 8, Wissa 11, Gakpo 6, all of them returned. That puts him second on the leaderboard behind the best manager that's been on FPL Therapy, which is me. So I'm in
you're
first.
Top of your own leaderboard. Oh, brilliant.
For when I do solo pods, there's no guess.
Fair
So I got 26 points. FPL console, Leon's on 25 points. So massive attempt there. In third is Praz, all the way back in Game Week 2. So I'll have to get Praz back on at some point and see if he can do another good job. But yeah, well done to Leon. So as I said, each week the guest basically gives us 3 players 10% or below that they think will do well. And I'd love to know in the comments, as always, who are your 3 differentials for this week. We'll start with your first one we've spoken about a little bit, which is Eberechi Eze. Only 8.1%, quite lowly owned.
Yeah, I just think that even though Leicester have improved recently under Rude, I still think they're a team to target. And I really like what I'm seeing from Palace at the moment. And I think, yeah, he's not been probably as good as people would have expected him to be this year. But with the record he's got in the Prem, the potential pens, set pieces, yeah, I think it's going to be good.
And building on that, your second differential is the best forward in the game, which is Mateta.
Yeah.
Tell me why Mateta's going to get 30 points this week.
Well, because he basically did last season. He got me top 100k finish. Yes, again, sharing penalty duty. I think he's a mega striker as well. And I still think Leicester is a team to target for sure.
Yeah, I'd really 3.2%. Like even at my rank, he's at 4%. And as I say, I'm not even seeing many people going to him right now. It's Chris Wood. It's in the past, Pedro, Raul Jimenez. So I like that he's flying under the radar. I'm not even that keen to recommend him. I'm like, you know what? I'll let his ownership stay low. But I don't think he's a game breaker. I just think he's a very decent shout. I love your third shout. I mean, we've just discussed him in a lot of detail. I think you're the first or maybe second person ever to pick a goalkeeper. You've gone for Andre Onana. We're going to concede shots even against Southampton, aren't we? So
yeah, I think, for that reason. Combination of, I think there's a clean sheet there for United and they will definitely concede chances. So it's obviously a risky one. And like you say, not many others have gone for goalkeepers, but there you go.
Yeah, if Man United keep a clean sheet and Palace score a few goals, you're in for a decent score. Perfect. Right, as I said, let us know your 3 differentials down below and we'll see how they get on for the next podcast. Final thing then is just to go through each of our teams. So you've got 2 free transfers and 0 in the bank. So I'll read out your team for those on audio. At the moment, you've got Sells in goal with Fabianski on the bench. Any temptation to play Fabianski or you just back the better defence?
Yeah, back the better defence.
Okay, so Sells in goal for Liverpool at home. Back line of currently Ola Aina against Liverpool at home, but might be benched or might be other player might be sold and then Aina would come onto the bench. Your other 2 players in defence are Lewis Hall and Robinson, both just elite options with good fixtures. Midfield 4 at the moment, I think you'll have Rodgers in there, Palmer, Semenyo, and Salah.
Yeah.
Decent with Dibbling on the bench. And then a front 3 of Haaland, who has the armband at the moment, and then Isak and Christopher Wood. And then your bench defenders are Colwell and Greaves. So talk to us, 2 free transfers. I'll turn just in case you need to see your team again.
Yeah,
0 in the bank. What are you thinking at the moment? And even if not this week, where are you thinking about going with your team?
Yeah, I don't think I can start double Forest defence. So I think Aina's going to go for Colwell. And even then, I'm still not that massively comfortable starting Colwell. So a few days ago, I was of the mind to potentially get rid of Semenyo to Ahmad, which would give me a bit of cash to do Colwell to Munoz. But I think with FA Cup fixtures and Ahmad's price slowly climbing up, I might get priced out of being able to do that, which leads me to think I'll probably just start Colwell and roll, most likely. I've noticed I've got Diblin starting there, but yeah, Rodgers will probably come in. Yeah. I think I'll likely roll,
It reminds me, a couple of weeks ago, I made moves to bring in Munoz and Mateta. And whilst I'm very glad to have them, I've now got 1 free transfer. And I'm sat there thinking, I wish I hadn't made those moves, potentially, because I'd have the 3 free transfers at this point. And as you spoke about, transfers are so valuable. Do I think Munoz and Ahmad are better than Semenyo and Colwell? Yes. I guess they're playing against each other is the other tricky thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Semenyo's against Colwell. I would be tempted to make those moves. In fact, I think I would make those moves, but then you are limiting yourself in what you can do in the future, especially if you decide not to wildcard and then sell Haaland. You're not going to have the transfers to redistribute the funds. It's a tricky position to be in. On Haaland captaincy, how likely are you to captain Haaland?
Well, at the moment, I'm like 80% sure, but I guess my viewers would disagree with that because historically, I've had the armband on Haaland on a few occasions before.
And you bottled it.
And I bottled it 5 minutes before the deadline.
Don't blame you.
And it's worked out. Every time it's worked out. Haaland's either blanked or scored 1 goal and Salah's just killed him. But I really do think this week is as strong as it gets, I think, if you're going to go outside of Salah. I think with the fixtures the other players have got and just how good Nottingham Forest have been, and it's away from home for Liverpool. Yeah.
I think famous last words, but you would imagine his ceiling isn't as high as in some other weeks. I would be so surprised if Liverpool put 4 goals past Forest. And whilst they could win 2-0 with the Salah brace, he doesn't tend to dominate games that much, where if Liverpool score a couple, he gets both of them. So I think Salah will get 8 to 11 points.
Yeah.
So if you want to go for that safety of captaincy, which I may well do, I like it. But I don't think it's not chasing the highest points potential. Cool. Right.
And I did just say Isak is the best captain as well.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, actually. So there is that option. Something feels wrong about captaining Isak. I don't know why. On my team, I've got the armband on Salah at the moment, but I've got Sanchez in goal, so hoping for a potential clean sheet or at least some saves. I actually really like my back 3 at the moment, which is Trent against Forest, Munoz against Leicester, and Gabriel against Spurs. If Trent does start Accrington Stanley at the weekend, there's going to be a slight concern for me. I do have Robinson on the bench. Could start him instead, but I'm not benching Trent. I think if I'm at a stage where I want to bench Trent, I think I sell him. So for now, Trent will stay and start for me. Midfield 4, I think, looks really good this week. So I've got Rodgers against Everton, Salah against Forest, Fernandes against Southampton at home, and Palmer against Bournemouth at home. Very happy to have kept Fernandes. I know a lot of people went Ødegaard and then were mugging off the Bruno owners when he got sent off. But yeah, exactly. But now Fernandes with the 7-pointer last week, and obviously Southampton this week looks really good. It's the sort of game you'll end up blanking in, but I think he could do well. He's honestly a captaincy shout. As a Man United fan that owns Bruno, that's enough.
Yeah.
I don't need any more emotional turmoil associated with Man United. And then my front 3 looks okay. So Isak against Wolves, Wood against Liverpool, and Mateta against Leicester away. So it's a decent team. Even Enzo and Robinson on the bench looks pretty good. I think I have to roll this team unless something crops up with the FA Cup games this week. And even if I had an injury to any of my attackers, I think I'd just start Enzo and roll. Any of my defenders, I'd start Robinson and roll. And my keeper, as long as Fabianski's back, I'd even start Fabianski and roll. So as boring as it is, I think with only 1 free transfer right now, I should start rolling. I've got 1.5 million in the bank. That's exactly enough money to play the assistant manager on slot, who we're expecting to be 1.5 million. So I am potentially just going to roll up until 24, 25 if I can, keep that money in the bank. And then obviously if it allows me to, I can play the assistant manager.
And I think the new rule they introduced this season where you can roll up to 5, it's so powerful when you've got 4 or 5 transfers as well.
Oh,
if you get up to that point, it's basically a wild card.
And you can't even then use the wild card and then carry the transfers through it.
It's so powerful.
I think that for the free hit's going to be very different this season because you could conceivably roll 4 free transfers up to the free hit, and then come back out the free hit with all of those frees, which is a great position to be in. Cool. Very nice. Let us know what your plans are for Game Week 21. But that is it, mate. Thank you very much for coming on the pod. I'm glad that weather finally permitted us doing this.
Yeah, me too. I had a.
Oh, yes. I forgot about this.
I have a little gift to present you. So
I'm very excited. This is the first guest to bring gifts. This is like leaving an apple on the teacher's desk.
Hopefully you can get it out of the box.
Oh, no.
And it's not broken on the train. Yeah, do whatever, mate.
Okay, I'm excited. I've also seen another gift associated, so I think I might know what this is. Don't want to smash it.
It's all right, mate.
Upside down. Look at this.
Golden and gold mug.
This is some good promotion as well.
And then alongside my great team name of Custard Cream, and you said these were your favourites as well.
There we go. I've got a mug, which is always wonderful. We can use this on the deadline stream. I've got some custard creams. I know Tom asked me on the previous episode, what are your favourite biscuits? And I was like, I don't know why I didn't think what a weird question. And then I forgot because it was months ago now. But custard creams absolutely slap. Let us know what your favourite biscuits are. Custard creams, bourbons, digestives, whatever it is, let us know. But yeah, thank you for coming on the pod,
My pleasure, mate. Thank you very much.
You've absolutely smashed it. As I said, make sure to subscribe to Golden Goal Fantasy Football on YouTube. 11,500 subs, which is pretty impressive. That must feel amazing. Does deadline streams, content throughout the week. How many episodes do video shot load a week now? 4 or 5?
As many as I can.
Smashes them out. So lots of content, lots of good advice. Obviously, 61K himself. So check it all out. Will be linked down below in the description, also in the title on YouTube. Thank you for coming on and thank you for watching. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to rate 5-star, and I will catch you next time. Bye, guys.